Hey everyone, welcome to that Paranormal M channel. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the latest videos. I'm so happy I get to do what I love most, sitting here and telling you about paranormal experiences from all over. And what makes me even happier is knowing these stories can help you relax and sleep better. So don't hesitate to share your own paranormal experiences with me. You know how every neighborhood has that one neighbor? Yeah. So ever since I was a kid, we've had this one woman across the street. I'll call her Mrs. Drummond. She's hard to describe without sounding dramatic, but she just radiates this mean-spirited energy. The kind of person who seems to get actual joy out of other people's problems. She's always been like that, gossiping, whispering, twisting stories, saying cruel things with this sweet little smile on her face. If you saw her from a distance, you'd think, oh, just a sweet old lady with her cup of tea. But once you get closer, it's different. She's about 76 now, I think. The weird thing is, she looks younger than she did when I was a teenager. I know that sounds impossible, but I went through some old photos once, like from family barbecues and stuff where she's in the background, and compared them to how she looks now. And I swear to you, she looks fresher, brighter, less tired. Almost like she's aging in reverse. My family still invites her over sometimes for tea. I think they just like the drama, honestly. The gossip. I never understood it. As a kid, I was terrified of her, and I couldn't even explain why. It was just her vibe. You know when someone walks into a room and the air feels heavier? That was her. Anyway, let me tell you about the Clovers. In the summer, she likes to sit in my backyard. She'll just stare at the grass, super quiet, like she's watching something only she can see. After about 15-20 minutes, she'll suddenly go, "Oh, I've got a little present for you." And every single time, she hands me a 4-leaf clover. Now, that'd be cute if it was once or twice, but she does this constantly. And it's not just one clover. If you look around where she was sitting, there'll be a little pile of them. 8, 10, sometimes more. All 4-leaf clovers. Every time. I don't even know how that's statistically possible. It's like the grass just gives them to her. So when I was about 16, I was going through a really rough patch. You know that age where everything feels heavy and permanent even though it isn't? I remembered the clovers and thought, okay, maybe I'll just keep one. For luck. Whatever. I picked one she'd given me and tucked it into the little clear pocket in my wallet, the one where people usually put a photo. For a few days, I carried it around everywhere. And then one night, I was sitting alone and it hit me. This came from her, from Mrs. Drummond. And suddenly it didn't feel like a good luck charm anymore. It felt wrong. So I took my wallet, walked down to this little river near my place. It's more like a wide stream, really. And I pulled the clover out. I remember holding it between my fingers and thinking, okay, that's it. I'm done with this. And I threw it into the water. I didn't do it secretly or anything. 2 of my friends were with me, Marco and Tess. They watched me throw it in. We even joked about it on the way home, like, there goes your cursed clover, dude. That kind of thing. The next morning, I was getting ready to go out. I opened my wallet to grab some cash. And there it was, the same clover, in the same pocket. I can't even explain the feeling. It wasn't like a jump scare. It was that slow, sinking cold that starts in your chest and moves outwards. I just stared at it for a few seconds thinking, no way. I'm misremembering. I must have mixed it up. Maybe I had 2. But instead of freaking out with me, they kind of backed off. You know that awkward laugh people do when they're scared and don't want to be? They kept saying, "You probably just grabbed a different one," or "You're being paranoid, man." I knew they didn't believe what they were saying. Or maybe they did and just didn't want to consider the other option. That clover haunted me. I kept my wallet in a drawer after that because I didn't even like having it near me. A few days later, I took the clover out, put it on a ceramic plate, and burned it with a lighter. I watched it turn to ash. After that, It never showed up again. But the way I felt in those days, that stuck with me. Fast forward about 8 years. Life moved on. I moved out for a while, then ended up back in the same house. Mrs. Drummond was still there, still weirdly youthful, still sitting in the grass in summer. One afternoon, about 3 years ago, something strange happened. I was walking home, just minding my own business, when a woman stopped me on the sidewalk. She was wearing a long, dark coat and a niqab that covered most of her face, just her eyes visible. I'd never seen her before, and she said my name. Not, "Hey you," or "Excuse me." She said my name, clearly, like we knew each other. Then she started talking like she knew my whole life. Details I don't remember ever telling a stranger. Things about my family, about the house, about the street. I don't know why, but instead of asking, "Who are you?" I just played along. I nodded like I knew her. It was instinct, like my brain didn't want to break whatever was happening. Then she looked past me, right over my shoulder, across the road, straight at Mrs. Drummond's house. And she said, very quietly, "There is a devil living across from you. Be careful what you accept from her." That's it. That's all she said about it. No explanation, no backstory. She just told me to be careful, then blessed me under her breath and walked away. I never saw her again. For a while, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was confused. Maybe it was some strange prank. I don't know. I pushed it to the back of my mind. Life was normal again. Nothing strange happened. Until a few nights ago. So, my friend, let's call her Lena, lives a few doors down. She's one of those people who has her life together. Works as a nurse, runs marathons, doesn't drink or do drugs, super grounded, you know? Lena and my neighbor had always had this weird little connection. Like Mrs. Drummond seemed to like her more than most of us. For Lena's birthday, my neighbor gave her a pair of earrings. Small, old-fashioned things. Silver with little green stones that looked like tiny leaves. I remember Lena showing them to me and saying, "They're not really my style, but it's sweet of her," and laughing. She wore them that night. Everything seemed fine at first. We all went home. I went to bed. Around 4 in the morning, I woke up for no real reason and wandered to the window, just to look out. You know how sometimes you just feel like looking outside? Like something pulled you there? I saw Lena on the street. She was still in the clothes from the party, hair messy, those earrings glinting in the streetlights. She was going from door to door, knocking, talking to whoever opened. I couldn't hear what she was saying at first, so I opened my window. She was asking people to take her for a drive. People were confused. Some turned her away, some just closed the door. It wasn't angry, it was more like unsettled, because everybody here knows her as calm, polite, super composed. The next night, it got worse. I looked out again and could see her through her bedroom window. She kept climbing in and out of it, over and over, out onto the little ledge, back in, out, in, for almost an hour. No obvious reason, just this restless, frantic movement, like she couldn't settle in her own skin. At that point, I was really worried. I called her parents. They live about 30 minutes away, but they came as fast as they could. I stood at my window watching their car pull up, watching them. Zoe, let me just talk to you like we're sitting at a kitchen table together, okay? When I was a kid, I was really into anything supernatural. Ghosts, strange lights, stories about other worlds. Part of it was because I used to see things out of the corner of my eye all the time. Little shadowy figures, flickers of light, shapes that didn't quite make sense. So I grew up pretty open to the idea that there's more going on than what we usually see. When I was about 10, my dad, Mark, noticed how obsessed I was getting with this stuff. One evening, he called my younger brother, Leo, and me into the kitchen. I still remember the sound of the chairs scraping on the linoleum floor as we sat down. He looked really serious and said, "You have to promise me you won't tell anyone about this. Not yet." This was before people talked openly about aliens on podcasts and documentaries like they do now. Back then, it was way more likely that people would just call you crazy. He took a breath and said, "When I was 7, something happened to me. Back when I was growing up in a little town outside Winnipeg, he told us it was the middle of the night. He'd gotten up to use the bathroom. The hallway light was off, and only this faint glow from a street lamp outside was sneaking through the curtains. As he walked past the short staircase that led down from the bedrooms to the living room, maybe 4 or 5 steps, something caught his eye. He turned his head and froze. At the bottom of the stairs, he saw 3 short beings. He said they were a pale, translucent bluish green, almost like they were made of light and fog at the same time. Their heads were large, their eyes big and black, and their bodies were thin. The one in the middle wore something that looked like a kind of vest or harness, and for some reason that made my dad feel like that one was in charge. Now, this is the part that always gives me chills. He said he suddenly started hearing a voice, but not with his ears. He said the voice didn't sound male or female. It was just clear, pure. And he heard it right in the middle of his forehead, in that spot people sometimes call the third eye. It kept repeating, in perfect clarity, "We are not here to harm you. We are not here to harm you." Over and over. Calm. Firm. He told us it was the clearest he's ever heard anything in his life, before or since. What surprised him most is that he wasn't really scared. He said he actually felt excited, curious. He realized he could talk back to them the same way. So, without moving his lips, he asked in his mind, "Will I ever see you again?" And he said they replied, "We will let ourselves be known." Right after that, he said there was a flash of light, not blinding, just sudden, and the 3 beings seemed to fold into a single glowing cube, floating in the air at the bottom of the stairs. Then the cube shrank smaller and smaller, like a pixel disappearing, until it was gone. And just like that, the stairwell was empty again. As a 10-year-old hearing this, I was spellbound. Of course I believed my dad. He's one of the most level-headed, grounded people I know. I carried that story around like a secret treasure. When I was about 12, I made the mistake of sharing it at a friend's birthday party. I thought everyone would be amazed. Instead, one of the kids just laughed and said my dad was delusional. A couple of others joined in. I remember my face getting hot, and I laughed it off in the moment, but inside it hurt, a lot. Because they weren't talking about some random stranger. They were talking about my dad. My dad has 2 brothers, my uncles, Daniel and Chris. Years later, I asked them about it separately, and they both confirmed the same basic story with their own details. My uncle Daniel, the youngest, told me he woke up that night and saw a strange glow through the crack of their bedroom door. It was open just a little. He saw 3 small shapes in the hallway, and he could tell they weren't adults. He said he got so scared he pulled the blanket over his head and stayed like that, trembling, until he fell back asleep. My Uncle Chris, the oldest, said he woke up too. He actually got out of bed and went to the doorway. He remembers standing there, watching the scene as my dad stood frozen near the top of the stairs, staring down at something. He said he knew it wasn't normal, but he couldn't make himself say anything. He just watched. The next morning, my dad told their mom, my grandmother Elena, what he'd seen. He was probably expecting her to tell him it was just a dream. Instead, she quietly said something that stunned him. She told him they were in my room too, at the foot of my bed. And then she added that it wasn't the first time she'd seen them. My dad and his brothers were apparently in such shock that morning that they just sat at the table, eating their cereal in silence. No teasing, no bickering, just three boys staring at their bowls. My Uncle Chris remembers looking out the window and telling my dad there was some kind of strange light or craft hovering above the neighbor's house. He described it like a bright, silent, glowing shape, just hanging there in the sky. But my dad said he didn't even go look. He was still too busy trying to make sense of what had happened in the hallway. I've checked this story with both uncles at different times, and the core of it always lines up. Same night, same house, same beings, different angles. My grandparents' house always felt different, even to me years later. There was a particular energy in that place. My grandmother used to say, "This is a blessed house," and she meant it. She was religious, and in her mind, whatever was visiting, the house was still protected, safe. A lot of strange things have happened in my family, to be honest. Odd experiences, dreams that came true, strange lights, that kind of thing. I've had my own share of weird moments that I can't neatly explain away. I'm at a point in my life now where I feel ready to start sharing more of these stories. Part of me hopes that by talking about them, someone else who's had something similar happen won't feel so alone or so crazy. You can call it whatever you want: aliens, spirits, hallucinations, visitors, or just an unsolved mystery. I know how it sounds, I really do. But I also know my family. I know my dad. I know my uncles. I know my grandmother. 4 people, all telling the same story from different angles, for decades. So when people say, "Your dad must be delusional," I think back to those quiet, serious faces around a breakfast table. 3 boys and their mother trying to process something they didn't have words for. And I think, there's more to this world than we understand. Anyway, that's one of the stories. Maybe I'll share more with you another time. So let me just talk to you like we're sitting at my kitchen table for a minute, all right? I'm a veteran. I got out of the military a few years back, and now I live up in northern Michigan, just outside this small lake town. It's not totally out in the sticks, but it's country enough. Long stretches of road, big pieces of land, a few farms, and neighbors you only really see when the snowblower breaks down. These days my life is pretty quiet. I've got kids, a wife, a mortgage, the usual. My idea of a wild Saturday night is grabbing an energy drink and a bag of chips, then staying up too late watching YouTube after everyone's asleep. That's honestly the highlight of my weekend sometimes. There's this 24-hour gas station convenience store about 5 minutes from my place, right off the highway. Because I'm always up late, I'd swing by there on weekend nights just to get out of the house a bit and feel like a person instead of just dad who does dishes. One night, I walk in there like usual, and I see this clerk behind the counter. And my brain just stutters, because he looks exactly like a guy I served with. I'll call my buddy Danny. Danny was also from Michigan. We'd gotten out of the service around the same time, and for a while we were pretty tight. We texted, called, played Xbox together sometimes. I even dated his cousin for a bit. He was that kind of friend, close enough that you don't think you'll ever completely lose touch. So I'm standing there in this fluorescent lighting, staring at this clerk, and it's like I'm looking at Danny's twin. Same jawline, same nose, same way he kind of squints when he smiles. I actually had to look away and then look back, like maybe my brain would correct itself. And then I noticed his arm. Danny had this tattoo on his left forearm. 4 thin black bands going all the way around, stacked on top of each other near the top of his forearm. He told me once, half joking, half serious, that it was some kind of old Japanese prison tattoo, like it meant something hardcore and mysterious. I never knew if that was true, but it sounded cool when we were younger. The clerk at the gas station had the exact same tattoo. Same arm, same place, same number of bands, same thickness. I remember just staring at his arm for a solid few seconds, because that was the part that broke my brain. You can look like someone, sure. People have doppelgangers. But the same tattoo in the same spot? That's specific. Now, to be fair, something about him felt different. I could tell in my gut, this isn't Danny. The voice was off, the posture, the way he moved. But I was so thrown that I almost forgot why I was there. I just bought my stuff kind of on autopilot. He was really friendly too. Not just regular clerk friendly, but like extra. He commented on my sweater of all things. Said he liked my individuality, which is not something I get told often when I'm just wearing some old hoodie. He smiled a lot, made small talk. It was just enough to make the whole thing feel a tiny bit weirder. I drove home in this weird fog and, like I always do when something even mildly interesting happens, I told my wife about it. I tell her everything, because honestly my world is pretty small, and this was, like, the big headline of my week. Her name's Mia, by the way. So I'm telling her about this guy at the station who looks exactly like Danny and has the same tattoo, and she listens really carefully. She asks me a couple of questions like, "Are you sure it wasn't just him?" And I'm like, "No, I don't think so. It didn't feel like him." We talk it through and decide that if it really were Danny, he probably would have recognized me and said something. We weren't strangers. We'd been through stuff together. You don't just forget a face like that. So then we try to rationalize it. Maybe the tattoo isn't as rare as Danny made it sound. Maybe it's not some unique prison thing. Maybe it's just a flash piece they got from a book at a shop somewhere. Maybe a lot of guys think the same bands look cool and get them without knowing the story behind them. Mia leans toward that explanation. She's like, he was probably just talking big to impress people. I kind of let it go. At least, I told myself I did. But I kept seeing the clerk. I'd go in on another Saturday night, and there he was, working the late shift. Then the next weekend. At some point, I realized I'd seen him enough times that it would now be awkward to ask, "Hey, do you know a guy named Danny?" Like, I'd missed my window for it to be casual. Still, he always felt just slightly off. Not creepy, just off. Familiar in a way that made my brain itch. Eventually, I couldn't shake it. So one night I decided, all right, let me just look Danny up, see what he's been up to. Maybe he actually moved up here. Maybe this is all a big coincidence, and also not a coincidence. I looked him up online, and that's when I found out that Danny had died. Not years ago, not some distant tragedy. He'd passed away about a month before I went searching for him. I just sat there staring at the screen. You know that feeling where your stomach drops out? That slow, hollow feeling? I had that. Danny was a good friend. He wasn't perfect, none of us were, but he was a solid guy. And I didn't even know he was gone. I didn't call. I didn't go to the funeral. I was just living my boring little life while his ended. I found his obituary page and left a message there, some clumsy attempt at a goodbye. Then I just sat in my chair and cried, quietly. My house was asleep, and I was mourning someone in the glow of a laptop screen. After that, it felt wrong not to tell the clerk. Even if it turned out he didn't know Danny at all, I kept thinking, what if he does? What if they're cousins or old friends or something, and I've been walking in here every weekend standing across from a guy who deserves to know? So I decided, next Saturday, I'm going to bring it up. I'll ask him if he knows Danny. If he doesn't, okay, I'll walk away feeling a little stupid, but at least I tried. If he does, maybe I can tell him what I knew about Danny, and we can share a moment or something. Saturday rolls around. I drive out to the station. It's late, like usual. He's not there. No big deal. People get days off, shifts change. I figure I'll just catch him another night. On my way back home, it's about 2 a.m. The roads are mostly empty. It's that weird, quiet time of night when everything feels a little bit unreal. I'm driving down my road, thinking about Danny, replaying old memories, and that whole thing with the clerk. Then my headlights catch someone up ahead. There's a man standing near my house. Not at my mailbox, not in a driveway, just there, on the side of the road, wearing a long coat that hangs down almost to his knees. Not quite a classic trench coat, but that's what my brain calls it. He's facing the road, facing me. My headlights hit him full on, and I can see just enough to know he's not one of my neighbors. At least, not anyone I recognize. His hands are down at his sides. No phone in his hand. No dog on a leash. No car pulled over nearby with the hazards on. Just a man, at 2 a.m., standing in the dark outside my neighborhood. I slow down. I don't know why, but I do. Part of me is thinking, is he okay? Does he need help? Another part of me is thinking, this is how people get murdered in movies. I ease past him, trying to get a better look without being too obvious. He doesn't move. Not a wave, not a step, nothing. Just watches my car go by. When I finally pass him, I get this surge of anger mixed with fear. I'm a grown man, a veteran, a dad. I've dealt with worse than some guy standing on the side of the road. So I think, screw this, and I stomp on the brakes. The car lurches to a stop. I look up at the rearview mirror, expecting to see him lit red by my brake lights so I can throw it in reverse and ask him what the hell he's doing out here. But there's nothing in the mirror. Just the empty road behind me, glowing in red. Now, distance-wise, I should have still been close enough to see him. I wasn't flying by. I'd slowed down as I approached him. There's no ditch deep enough for him to vanish into. No big trees right there to duck behind. No driveway he could have sprinted into without me noticing. And I'm just sitting there with my foot on the brake, feeling this cold, prickly sensation crawl up my back. I actually thought about backing up and looking more carefully, but then I had this other thought. What if I'm overreacting? What if it's just some teenager waiting on a ride? I don't want to be that weird old guy who jumps out of his car and starts interrogating kids at 2 a.m. So I talked myself down, took my foot off the brake, and drove home. When I got inside, I told Mia everything. Every detail. The missing clerk, Danny's obituary, the guy standing on the road. This time, she didn't try to rationalize as much. She just got quiet. I could see in her face that something about it bothered her on a deeper level. She didn't say, "That's nothing." She just worried. I told her I was thinking of driving down to visit Danny's grave. It felt like something I needed to do. Say a proper goodbye. Pay my respects. Every time I picked a day and told her, though, something would come up. She'd make plans, or forget I'd mentioned it and schedule something else, or suddenly really need my help with something at that exact time. At first, I thought it was just bad timing, but after the second or third time, I started to suspect that, deep down, she didn't want me to go. Like she had that same bad feeling she used to get about houses when she was a kid, and didn't even realize she was acting on it. After that night with the man in the coat, I never saw the clerk again. Not once. And listen, I don't have a big life. I don't drive to the next town over just to see what's there. I go to work, I come home. I run errands in the same little circle. That gas station is part of my routine. If he'd kept working there, I would have seen him again. Guaranteed. But he was just gone. New faces behind the counter. Different people on the late shift. Same store, same smell, same ding of the door. Just no sign of him. No explanation. No, hey, did you hear what happened to that one guy? Nothing. So that's it. That's the whole thing. I don't have a neat ending for you. No big revelation. No jump scare. All I can tell you is, it happened. I talk about it with Mia every now and then, and it still gives me that same hollow feeling in my chest. Same little shiver down the back of my neck. My life is pretty boring, honestly. But this is the one story I can look you in the eye and swear is absolutely real. So, I want to tell you about something that's been hanging around my fiancé for years. I'm not totally sure what I believe about ghosts and all that, but whatever this is, it seems to follow him, not the place. And honestly, that's what freaks me out the most. Back when Liam still lived with his parents, weird stuff would happen all the time in their house. But when he finally moved out on his own, everything just stopped. For a couple of years, nothing. No strange noises, no weird dreams, no little coincidences. Then we moved in together, and it all started again. The first story he ever told me about it was from when he was a teenager. One night, he had this awful nightmare. He woke up all shaky, and when his eyes adjusted, he saw a woman standing in his bedroom doorway. He said she looked completely out of place, like she was from another time. She was wearing this pale blue summer dress, almost like something you'd wear to a picnic. The fabric hung just below her knees, and her hair was long and dark, but he couldn't make out her face clearly. She was just watching him. He pulled the blanket over his head like a little kid and eventually forced himself back to sleep. The next morning, he's in the kitchen with his dad, Mark, and Mark goes, super casually, "Hey, I had a weird dream last night. I dreamt there was this woman standing over you while you were sleeping. She was in one of those light blue dresses, like from the 70s or something." Same dress, same woman, and Liam hadn't told him a thing yet. That was the first time he really thought, okay, something is definitely off here. Another time, when he was still living there, he and his dad were downstairs in the basement, just hanging out. They weren't doing anything creepy, just playing pool and listening to music. In the corner of the room, his little nephew had left one of those toy police cars, the plastic kind that lights up and plays siren sounds when you press a button. It had been sitting there for hours, not touched, not moved. In the middle of their game, the thing suddenly lights up, siren blaring, and slowly rolls forward from where it was parked against the wall. It didn't just wobble a little and fall over. It actually rolled across the floor toward them. No one else was home. No windows open. No fan blowing. They both just froze and watched it until it stopped near the foot of the stairs. Mark walked over, picked it up, and just went, "Huh, guess the batteries kicked back in," and put it back. But Liam said he could tell his dad didn't really believe that. Fast forward a few years. Liam and I finally get our own place, a small 2-story townhouse. We're excited, we're broke, and we're trying to make it feel like home. For a little while, everything is normal. Then we get our first dog, a goofy little mutt named Benny. About a week after we bring Benny home, Liam has to leave on a short work trip, so it's just me and the dog at the house. One night, I'm sitting on the couch scrolling on my phone, trying to unwind. It's pretty quiet. Then Benny lifts his head, ears perked, and just stares toward the hallway that leads to the stairs. At first, I think he's just hearing the neighbors, but then he stands up, starts growling, real low at first, and walks over to the bottom of the stairs. Our upstairs linen closet is right at the top of those stairs, and he's locked in on it like a laser. He starts barking, full on, non-stop, at that closet. I'm alone. It's past midnight, and he will not stop. Eventually, I'm so freaked out, I grab a heavy blanket, roll it up, and shove it tight along the bottom of the closet door so it feels sealed, I guess. Only then does he finally calm down enough to come back to the bedroom with me. But the whole night he sleeps with his back pressed against my leg, facing the door. And that was just the start. Around that same time, I started working third shift at a small nursing home, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shifts. That meant Liam was alone at night a lot, and he's the one who started noticing the really dramatic stuff. Our townhouse is pretty open. When you walk in, the living room and kitchen kind of share the same space, with just a counter dividing them. The fridge sits right at the edge of the kitchen, close to the counter. One night, Liam's home alone, sitting at his desk that faces the living room, gaming with his headphones on. Out of nowhere, he hears this loud thud, thud, thud behind him. He turns around just in time to see 2 boxes of cereal and a bag of rice that had been sitting on top of the fridge flying off, literally moving through the air and landing near the oven, a good 4 or 5 feet away from where they were. Not sliding, not tipping over, thrown. He told me he paused his game, just stared at everything on the floor, and said out loud, "Okay, that was not cool." About an hour later, he's still on edge but trying to pretend it's nothing. The laundry area is in this little nook off the kitchen. We keep a plastic laundry basket on top of the dryer because there's not much space. He hears another loud bang, goes to check. The laundry basket is on the floor, about a foot in front of the dryer. No one's touched it. The dryer wasn't running. There's no reason it should have bounced or fallen that far. He said that was the moment he stopped trying to talk himself out of it. A few nights after that, something happened that really got to him. We usually sleep with some kind of light on. Sometimes it's a little lamp, sometimes it's the closet light. That night, we left the closet light on and forgot to close the closet door before going to bed. Sometime in the middle of the night, he wakes up. You know that hazy, half-awake state where you're just trying to figure out what time it is? He rolls over, grabs his phone, and as he's doing that, he catches movement out of the corner of his eye. He says in the thin strip of light from the closet, he sees a figure, tall, still, standing in the corner of the closet, just inside the doorway. It looked like someone was leaning slightly forward, peering out at him, like they were deciding whether to step into the room. He couldn't see a clear face, just the outline of a woman, that same kind of old-fashioned dress shape, almost brushing her knees. He blinked, and she was gone. He didn't wake me up. He just lay there, staring at the closet until the sun came up. The next morning, he told me, and as he's describing her, how the dress hung, the way she stood there watching, I realized she sounded exactly like the woman he'd seen in his parents' house all those years ago. The same presence that his dad had dreamed about over him. That's when it really hit me. This isn't just a creepy house thing. At this point, I honestly don't know if it's the places that trigger it, or if something is attached to him specifically, or if it's some weird, shared imagination thing. I don't have a neat explanation, and trust me, I've tried to find one. All I know is, wherever Liam goes, the strange stuff seems to find him. And sometimes, late at night, when Benny suddenly lifts his head and stares at the hallway for no reason at all, I catch myself wondering if she's standing there, watching. So, I guess I should start by saying that my partner, Noah, seems to have this little storm cloud of weirdness that follows him everywhere. We've been together for 3 years now, living together for about 2.5, and honestly, the strange stuff was happening long before I came into the picture. It just didn't stop when I did. Back when Noah still lived with his parents, they had a lot of odd things happen in that house. But the moment he moved out for college, everything went quiet. No noises, no shadows, nothing. Then we got our place together, and it was like someone flipped the on switch again. The first story he ever told me was from those early days at his parents' place. One night, He had this really vivid nightmare and jolted awake. When he opened his eyes, there was a woman standing in his bedroom doorway. He said she looked solid, not like a shadow or anything. She was wearing this pale yellow sundress, the kind you'd wear in late spring, and her hair was long and dark, hanging forward a bit so he couldn't see her face clearly. He just lay there, frozen, staring at her. Then he blinked, and she was gone. He figured it was sleep paralysis or his brain playing tricks on him. The next morning, he went downstairs, and his dad, Mark, looked exhausted. Over coffee, Mark told him he'd had a weird dream that same night. In his dream, there was a woman standing over Noah while he slept, leaning over him like she was checking if he was breathing. Mark described her dress, her hair, even the way she stood, and it was exactly the same as what Noah had seen. Noah hadn't told him a thing yet. Another time, when he still lived there, Noah and his dad were downstairs in the den throwing darts and talking. The TV was off, no music, just them joking around. In the corner of the room, there was one of those little kids' light-up toy trucks Noah's nephew had left behind. It had been sitting there all evening, totally still. In the middle of their conversation, the truck suddenly lit up, made that little revving noise, and rolled itself across the floor toward them. No one had touched it. No air vent was blowing on it. The windows were closed. It just went. Mark apparently just said, "Nope," picked it up, and took the batteries out right then and there. After Noah moved out on his own for a while, all of that stopped. No strange dreams, no toys moving, nothing worth mentioning. It was quiet for a couple of years. Then we signed the lease on our townhouse, and the quiet ended. About a week after we brought home our first dog, a goofy little mutt named Riley, Noah had to leave on a short work trip. So it was just me and Riley in the house one night. I was lying on the couch, half watching some crime show, when Riley suddenly hopped up, fur on his back standing straight up, and started growling. Not just a little woof, this low, steady growl that I'd never heard from him before. He was staring up the stairs. I muted the TV and listened, thinking maybe someone was in the hallway or outside. Nothing. Riley slowly walked to the bottom of the stairs, still growling, and then started barking like crazy at the hallway closet at the top. I followed him up, heart pounding, but trying to be rational. I opened the closet, checked the shelves, pushed the coats aside. Nothing. Just our jackets and a box of Christmas decorations. I told him, "See, there's nothing there," and closed the door. Things escalated that same week. At the time, I had just started working overnight shifts at an assisted living facility. That meant Noah was home alone most nights, and he'd usually stay up late gaming in the living room. Our place is pretty open, kitchen and living room all in one space with just a counter between them. The fridge is to the right, kind of near that dividing counter. One night, Noah said he was in the middle of a game when he heard this rustling sound behind him, like plastic crinkling. He thought Riley was into something, so he turned around and saw 3 bags of chips fly, literally fly, off the top of the fridge. Not just slide off. He swears they went out and forward, like someone had grabbed them and tossed them toward the stove. They landed a good 5 or 6 feet away, near the oven. He checked Riley first, thinking maybe the dog had bumped the fridge, but Riley was asleep on the other side of the room. No one else was home. No one was near the kitchen. About an hour later, he heard another thump from the laundry nook. We keep a plastic laundry basket on top of the dryer, and he said he watched, from his desk, as the basket slid to the edge and then popped off like it had been pushed. It landed on the floor about a foot in front of the dryer. At that point, he paused his game, walked through the townhouse, and turned on basically every light. A few nights after that, something happened that really stuck with him. We usually keep a light on when we sleep, sometimes a small lamp, sometimes the closet light, just so the room isn't pitch black. That night, we accidentally left the walk-in closet door partly open, with the closet light on. I slept straight through the night, but Noah didn't. He told me he woke up around 3 in the morning. You know that heavy, groggy feeling when you're half awake? He rolled over to check his phone on the nightstand. As he turned, from the corner of his eye, he saw someone standing in the closet. The door was open just enough that he could see into the corner, and he said it looked like a person pressed into the shadows, their head slightly tilted, just watching. Not moving, not coming closer, just there. He said he froze for a second, and in that split second, it was so real that he started to say my name, thinking maybe I was up looking for something. Then he realized I was right next to him in bed, breathing deeply, fast asleep. He blinked, turned his head fully toward the closet, and whatever he'd seen was gone. Just our clothes and a pile of shoes. He didn't wake me up that night, but he told me in the morning, and I could see how shaken he was. Noah's not the type to jump at every little thing. If anything, he's annoyingly logical about stuff. But that really got to him. Since then, it's like there's this pattern. The really strange things, the ones I can't explain away with drafts or old wiring or a creaky building, they always seem to happen around him. When he's alone in the house, when he's the one waking up at night, when he's the one people dream about. I don't know if it's the house. We've moved once since then, and little things still happen. I don't know if it's something attached to him, or something that just notices him more. All I know is that, wherever Noah goes, the weirdness eventually finds its way back. And somehow, I've just kind of accepted that it's part of loving him. The dog growling at empty corners, the random objects that refuse to stay put, the way he sometimes wakes up and stares into the dark, like he's trying to convince himself he didn't see what he just saw. So, a few nights ago, I had this dream that felt so real, it kind of stayed with me all day after. I want to tell you about it because it felt less like a random dream and more like a visit. In the dream, I'm at this strange place that's half school camp, half mountain lodge. Think a big wooden chalet, but with neon signs and an old sound system. Like someone tried to turn a cozy winter cabin into a club and then just stopped updating it 15 years ago. There's a bar, wooden beams, old posters on the walls, and that soft golden light you get in late afternoon. Outside the windows, I can see trees and a bit of sky, like we're somewhere slightly remote. Inside, though, it's full of people from my high school years, classmates, faces I haven't seen in ages, and my old friend group. They all look about 17, 18, but I'm my current age. Everyone is laughing, dancing, talking over the music. You know that feeling when a room just hums with social energy? It's like that. Except, not for me. No matter where I walked, people drifted away. Someone would make eye contact for a second, and then suddenly turn and join another conversation. Groups would tighten up the moment I came near, like there wasn't space for me to step in. I wasn't invisible exactly. They saw me. But it was like I didn't belong in their world anymore. I remember trying to figure out why I was even there. You know that feeling of being both inside something and outside it at the same time? I kept walking around the lodge, looking for an exit. But every door just led to another hallway, another room, another part of the same place. I couldn't leave. At some point, I spotted one of my closest friends from back then. Let's call him Marco. In real life, Marco was such a kind, goofy person, and in the dream, he looked like his teenage self again. Hoodie, messy hair, the whole thing. I felt this wave of relief, like, finally, someone I know, someone safe. He headed toward the bar, so I followed him. I caught up and said something like, "Hey, aren't you going to wait for me so we can sit together?" The kind of thing you say when you're half joking, half hoping. He didn't seem angry or cold. He just smiled and shrugged, like it was no big deal, and said, "You know, they're waiting for me to drink and dance," and then drifted away into the crowd. The weird thing is, As soon as he left, the bar area felt almost abandoned. The music sounded faint, like it was coming from another room. The bar counter looked dusty, like it hadn't really been used in years. Bottles were still there, but the labels were faded. I remember seeing dust suspended in the light from the windows, moving slowly, like time itself had slowed down. The whole place felt nostalgic, but not in a sweet way. More like walking through an old memory you're not sure you're supposed to be in anymore. Eventually, the crowd thinned out. The music quieted. People kind of faded away until the lodge was almost empty. That's when I noticed him. There was a man standing near the end of the bar, someone who clearly worked there. A waiter or bartender, maybe both. I realized he'd been around the whole time, but I hadn't really seen him until that moment. He was dressed very simply. Dark jeans, a plain shirt, and he was holding a well-worn leather jacket over his arm, like he was about to clock out and leave. He didn't look old, but not young either. One of those people whose age is hard to pin down. His presence felt grounded. "Calm," she said through these shaky, happy tears. "It happened. It finally happened." And he smiled at her, this warm, reassuring smile, and replied, "See? I told you it would come right when it was meant to." His tone was light, almost playful, but there was something very certain in it, like he really knew what he was talking about. Clara let out this sort of breathy laugh, like a weight dropped off her shoulders, and said, "Yeah, it's over now." I had no idea what they were talking about. It felt like I'd stumbled into the end of someone else's story, one that had nothing to do with me. But at the same time, something about their conversation tugged at me. I felt this weird mix of sadness and hope in my chest. When Clara walked away, I went up to him. I didn't even know what I wanted to ask. The words just came out of my mouth before I decided to say them. I said, "What about me? For me, is it over too?" And I remember, even in the dream, thinking, what am I talking about? What it? But emotionally, it made perfect sense. It was like my soul knew what I meant, even if my mind didn't. He looked at me with this almost mischievous, knowing expression, like he'd been expecting that question. His eyes were kind, but sharp in that way that makes you feel very seen. Then he smiled and said, in this calm, slightly teasing tone, "For you, it's just beginning." Behind him, Clara, who had stopped a few steps away, turned back and chimed in, "See? I told you." Like she somehow already knew this about me too. His energy was hard to describe. He wasn't flirty or dramatic. He felt like someone who has watched your whole life unfold from a distance and still likes you, still believes in you. There was something almost messenger-like about him. Not quite human, not in a scary way, but in that way where you feel like you're talking to someone who understands more than they're saying. I asked him, "Are you leaving?" He nodded a little and said, very matter-of-factly, "Yeah, I'm leaving on Friday." I don't know why, but that specific detail stuck with me. Friday. It felt important somehow. Then I asked, "Will I see you again?" He paused, like he was choosing his words carefully, and then with a little grin, he said, "A lot of people say they meet me once in their life, and once on a screen." I frowned and repeated, "On a screen?" He smiled wider and said it again, almost like a line from a movie he'd delivered 1,000 times. Once in their life, and once in a movie. He said it twice, the same way both times, like the repetition itself was part of the message. I had this strong feeling that I should recognize him, like when you see an actor playing a new role, but you can't remember which film you saw them in. That sense of, I know you from somewhere. I kept trying to place him, but nothing came. After that, we just looked at each other for a second, and then we hugged. And it wasn't awkward or formal. It was the kind of hug you give someone you've known forever, someone you trust completely. There was so much comfort in it. I felt safe and seen and oddly encouraged. I think he said something to me after that, something gentle that nudged me toward waking up. I don't remember the exact words, only the feeling. It's okay to go now. You can wake up. And then I woke up. When I opened my eyes, I had this really strong sensation that I had just met someone important. Not just a random dream character, but someone I was supposed to meet. I kept thinking, I should know who he is. I should understand what he was trying to tell me. Even now, I can't fully explain it, but that sentence keeps echoing in my mind. So, this all started in my dorm. I live in this really old residence hall on campus, like it's been around almost a century. My room's actually pretty big for a dorm, and when you first walk in, there's this little entry area with a table where I usually dump my keys and mail. One night, I was standing there by the table talking to my boyfriend. Well, my boyfriend at the time, I'll call him Eli. And after we finished talking, he walked toward my bed on the other side of the room. I turned back to the table to organize some stuff, and a few seconds later, I felt this pressure on my backside, like someone put their hand there. He does that sometimes when he's being playful, and I could feel that sort of someone's right behind me presence. So I just assumed it was him, and I even smiled a little, like, okay, very funny. But when I turned around, Eli was way across the room, sitting on the edge of my bed, looking down at his phone. There was nobody behind me. We both kind of froze. I told him what I felt, and he got this weird look on his face, but we ended up brushing it off, like, okay, the dorm is old, maybe I imagined it, that kind of thing. The next day, though, we got into an argument. Nothing huge, but enough that he left the room to cool off. There's this side staircase a little ways down the hall that nobody really uses, and he went to sit there by himself. Later, when we were talking about it, he told me that while he was on the stairs, he heard footsteps coming down toward him. Slow, like someone was taking careful steps. He thought it was me coming to talk to him, so he didn't even look up at first. Then he said he felt a presence beside him. He saw a shadow on the wall that looked like my silhouette, my height, my hair, just kind of there with him. And then he felt a hand on his back, the way I do when I'm trying to comfort him. He said it felt exactly like me. He was still upset and waiting for me to say something, but I didn't. So he turned around to look at me, and there was no one there. The stairs were completely empty. When he looked back at the wall, even the shadow was gone. After that, he went outside to this small courtyard near the building to calm down. It was really late and pretty quiet, just a light breeze. While he was out there, he noticed one tree in the corner moving way more violently than the others, like something big was pushing through the branches. He said it didn't match how the wind felt at all. Everything else was barely moving, but that one spot was shaking. From there, things kind of followed him. He doesn't live with me, so most of what's been happening since then has been at his house. One night, he was taking a shower. Everyone else was asleep, and the bathroom door has one of those older locks, but the key for it had been missing for a while. He said he suddenly noticed the lock turning very slightly, like someone was trying to twist it from the outside, just enough to move, not enough to click. When he stared at it, he saw something dark, like a little shadow, scurry under the gap at the bottom of the door. It was quick, like it darted away. The next day, something similar happened to his cousin when they were using the same bathroom. They didn't even know about his shower story at that point. I was in there, just minding my business, when I heard a knock on the door. It was Eli. He sounded a little shaken and asked, "Hey, can I come in?" I said, "Yeah." and he opened the door and looked really confused. He asked me, "Did you just call me?" I told him no, I hadn't said anything. I hadn't even spoken since I left the kitchen. He swore he heard me calling his name from down the hall, loud and clear, in this specific teasing voice I use sometimes. He said it was exactly how I sound, and it used the nickname that only I call him. That's what freaked him out the most. It wasn't just my normal voice. It was a tone I only use with him. He asked me if I could try to copy it, to see if maybe he'd just imagined it. I tried a few times, but he kept shaking his head and saying, "No, that's not it. It was sharper, closer, more like you were right next to me." And that's just one example. These kinds of things have been happening to him almost daily now. He'll be in his room, or the kitchen, or the bathroom, and he'll feel like something is there with him. He says the feeling gets especially strong when he's sad or stressed. There was one time he told me that he was lying in bed feeling really low, and he suddenly felt this gentle pressure on his shoulder, like someone was trying to comfort him. He said, "It felt like you. I almost said your name out loud, but you weren't there." He'll text me sometimes saying, "It's here again," or "It feels like you're in the room, but I know you're not." There's also this smell in his bedroom that we can't figure out. It's only in his room, nowhere else in the house. It's this weird, rotting kind of smell, like something wet that's been left too long, or old food hidden somewhere. But we've cleaned everything, moved furniture, checked the closet, the vents, under the bed, everything. It just lingers. It comes and goes, but when it's there, it's really strong. So that's what's been going on. To sum it up, it started in my old dorm with something touching me when no one was there. Then something that looked and felt like me went to comfort him on the stairway. He keeps seeing and hearing things at his house, locks moving, shadows under doors, something calling his name in my voice. He feels a presence most when he's sad, and sometimes it tries to comfort him in ways that feel like me. His room has this strange, rotting smell we can't trace. I don't know if it's something attached to him, or to both of us, or if it somehow followed us from the dorm, but it feels personal, like it's trying to copy me or use me to get close to him. I'm honestly worried about him. I care about him a lot, and it's getting harder and harder to just brush this off as nothing. So, that's our story. I don't really know what we're dealing with, or why it seems so focused on him, and on me, in a way. But if you're listening to this, and you know anything about this kind of thing, or you've experienced something similar, we'd really love any insight or guidance you can give us. So before I dive in, let me give you a little context. I grew up in a tiny town down in southern Mississippi, not too far from the Gulf. A lot has happened in my family. I lost my older brother Eli about 5 years ago, and that shattered all of us in ways I still don't fully understand. After that, things at home really started to crack. My parents, Lena and Mark, had already been rocky, but from the time I was around 11 until right before my mom and I left, it felt like their marriage was just one long argument. I won't get into all the details of the yelling and the late-night fights, but my dad, he wasn't loyal, he wasn't honest, and he wasn't really a father in any way that mattered. I'm 19 now, and thankfully my mom and I don't live in that house anymore. It never felt like a home. Not emotionally, and honestly not spiritually either, once you hear the rest of this. So, the closet. Upstairs there was this little hallway that opened into my bedroom, and off to the side was my closet. Directly under that closet was my parents' bedroom. That detail matters. From the very first night I moved from my downstairs room to that upstairs one, I hated that closet. Like a deep, irrational kind of hate. I didn't like going in there. I'd get this tight feeling in my chest, like I was walking into someone else's space and they did not want me there. I was weird about the door, too. If I was in my room and the closet door was cracked open even an inch, it drove me crazy. I'd get up, walk over, swing it all the way open like I was catching something in the act, stare into the dark for a second, and then slam it shut. Every time. But if I was actually inside the closet, I didn't want the door closed behind me either. Both options, door open or door closed, felt wrong, just in different ways. Because of that, I kind of stopped using it like a normal person. I'd let clean clothes pile up in a basket and just pull outfits out of there for weeks, sometimes months. Not exactly a life tip, but I was genuinely scared of that space. And then there was the smell. My mom and I tried so many times to describe it, and the best we ever came up with was, imagine an unwashed, sweaty guy's armpit mixed with an old sneaker that's been tumbled dry too long. Damp, sour, hot, and stale all at once. It would come and go, but when it was bad, it was bad. When I was younger, our neighbor's grandson, Jonah, told me this story that our house was on top of an old Native American burial ground. He said Choctaw specifically. Kid stuff, right? I brushed it off, but it stuck in the back of my mind. Sometimes we'd go wandering out in the woods behind the house, and way back, deeper in the wet, marshy part, there were these almost perfectly round little hills. Not like the gentle slope our house sat on. These were distinct, like someone had mounded the earth on purpose. I remember looking at them and thinking about Jonah's story and getting this little shiver, even while telling myself it was nothing. Anyway, my first really strange experience happened when I was around 9 or 10. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, lying flat on my back, which I never do, and staring straight toward the foot of my bed. And I knew something was wrong before I even focused my eyes. I couldn't move, couldn't talk. I was fully awake, but my body felt like it was nailed to the mattress. At the foot of my bed, I could see the outline of something. It was darker than the darkness in the room, if that makes sense. Like someone had cut a person-shaped hole out of the night and pasted it there. I just stared at it. I don't know how long. Maybe it was only a minute, but it felt stretched out and sticky, like time didn't move right. I don't remember how it ended. I don't remember screaming or it leaving. It's like 1 second it was there, and then the memory just cuts. Either I passed out or it vanished, and my brain didn't keep the part in between. I can still see that shape in my mind though, as clear as if it were yesterday. A few nights later, something similar happened. I woke up already sitting up in bed, which is strange in itself, and I was staring straight out my open bedroom door into the hallway. It was like I had woken up mid-moment, already looking, already waiting for something. From my bed, the wall with the windows, the outside wall, was on the right, and on the left was the wall that boxed in the stairwell. I was just staring into that strip of hallway when I saw movement. That same sort of figure, or at least I believe it was the same presence, lurched across the hallway. Not walked, lurched, from the outside wall to the stairwell wall, like it was dragging 2 long limbs behind it, or moving in a way a person isn't built to move. Again, I don't remember what happened after. No screaming, no jumping out of bed. Just a blank after that moment, like my brain refused to process the rest. Years later, when I was maybe 16, my friend Marina came over. I'd told her bits and pieces about the closet and the smell and the weird way the house felt sometimes. She's really into spiritual stuff and energy and all that, so she brought sage and some herbs and went room to room, especially focusing on that closet. For a while after she smudged the place, things actually felt lighter. The smell in the closet disappeared for a couple of months. I could step inside without my stomach dropping, and I remember thinking, okay, maybe we fixed it. Maybe it's all in my head. But it didn't stay that way. Fast forward to this past summer, late May into August. It was brutally hot in Mississippi. I had one of those little window AC units in my room, and I kept it blasting pretty much non-stop between 66 degrees Fahrenheit and 68 degrees Fahrenheit. My room was like a little freezer, which I loved. My mom had started regularly salting the closet doorway by then. She'd read about salt being protective, absorbing negative energy and all that. And honestly, the smell had come back stronger than ever. You'd open the closet door, and it felt like the stink hit you before the air did. So she'd sprinkle a neat line of salt across the threshold. At first, it made her feel better, like she was doing something. But then the door itself started acting strange. Now, I'll admit, the doors in that house were cheap, thin, hollow core, installed fast when my parents built the place. The house is literally the same age as me. But even for cheap doors, this was weird. The closet door began to swell. It got harder and harder to close, like it was pushing back. You'd have to lean your weight into it to get the latch to catch, and sometimes it would stick, like the frame had twisted. But nothing else upstairs was doing that. The AC was right there in the bedroom, pushing out cold air, so it's not like that one door was exposed to some crazy humidity the rest of the house missed. My mom even cut a little vent into the bottom of the door, thinking maybe it was a circulation thing. It helped for, like, a second. Then the swelling got worse again. And then came the part that really freaked both of us out. One afternoon, not even a week after she'd last salted the doorway, literally just a few days, my mom went upstairs to grab something out of my closet. I was downstairs at the time. I remember hearing her step up onto the landing, and then this sharp, surprised noise from her. Not quite a scream, but close. The salt was gone. Not scattered, not crusted, gone. In its place, right where that line had been, was this shallow, cold puddle of water. Or not just water, it had this faint, weird slickness to it, like it had soaked up something else. When she told me, she said, "It felt wrong, like stepping in a spill that was clean and dirty at the same time. It hadn't rained. Nothing in the closet leaked. There weren't any pipes running under that doorway, and the AC condensation didn't drip there. There was no reason for water to be there, and definitely no reason for all that salt to dissolve so completely in just a couple of days." She checked the baseboards, the ceiling, everything she could think of. Dry. Totally dry. Just that one puddle right where the salt had been. We cleaned it up, of course. Toweled it, wiped it, checked it again. And both of us just kind of avoided talking about what we were really thinking. Because logically, sure, you can try to blame humidity or some weird little leak. You can come up with a dozen explanations if you really want to sleep at night. But I grew up in that house. I know how it felt when things got heavy, how the air would change, how the smell in that closet seemed to have a mind of its own. I know what I saw at the foot of my bed and in that hallway, even if I can't prove it to anyone. And when I picture my mom stepping into that salty puddle, right on the threshold of the one place in the house that always felt wrong, I can't shake the feeling that something in that closet didn't like the boundary she was trying to put down. We don't live there anymore. We left, and I don't miss that house for a second. But sometimes, when I'm lying awake at night in our new place, I'll glance at my own perfectly normal closet door, closed and quiet, and I'll think about that old one, swelling, breathing, and I wonder if whatever was there upstairs, above my parents' room, is still pacing back and forth in the dark, waiting for the next person to move in and crack that door open. So, let me tell you about this house I used to live in. Back in 2018, my family and I moved into this little place in the downtown area of a small city in southern Saskatchewan, like 20 minutes from the US border. The house itself wasn't anything special, kind of old, kind of cramped, but the location was weird. To the right of us was a duplex and a small parking lot. To the left, another parking lot and this tiny stone house. That stone house was famous in town. It was the first house ever built there. People always talked about it like it was a landmark. It's still standing, all worn down and stubborn. For some reason, in my head, everything spooky that happened in our place sort of pointed back to that stone house. It was literally about 30 steps away, separated from us by a parking lot and this white picket fence. I don't know why, but it just felt like whatever was going on started over there and bled into our place. Anyway, let me walk you through what happened. The bells on the door. The first thing I remember was late 2018, before COVID was even a whisper. It was nighttime. I was at home with my mom and my dad. Mom was on the couch watching some drama show, and Dad was in the kitchen doing dishes and humming to himself. We had these little bells hanging on the front doorknob. We'd bought them to train our dog Milo so he could ring them when he needed to go outside. That training lasted like 1 day. After that, the bells just became our unofficial, someone just came in alert. So I'm sitting there in the living room, scrolling on my phone when I hear the bells. Clear as day. Jingle, jingle. I immediately think, oh, that's my older sister Maya, because she was the only one who wasn't home yet. I got excited, because we always debriefed our day in our room. So I got up, walked straight to our bedroom, and it was empty. I remember just standing there like, okay, weird. I knew I'd heard the bells. So I went to the entrance, thinking maybe she was still taking her shoes off or something. But no. The front door was closed. Locked. What was open was the basement door. It was slightly ajar, just slowly moving like someone had pushed it and let it go. There was no draft, no window open, nothing like that. Just this door, gently shifting back and forth like it had just been touched. I got this cold feeling in my stomach. You know when your body realizes something before your brain does? I went back to the living room and asked my mom, "Hey, is Maya home?" She looked at me and said, "No, why? I thought that was you. I heard the bells." So now we both know we heard it. Maya didn't get home for another hour. Footsteps and laughter. Fast forward to 2020. My sister-in-law Lena had just moved in with us after having my nephew Eli. At that point, it was just me, Lena, and Eli at home. Everyone else was out. I was in my room, lying on my bed, half on my phone, half spacing out, when I heard footsteps in the hallway. My older sister Maya has this very specific way of walking. She kind of drags her feet a little. It sounds lazy and familiar in a way that's weirdly comforting. That's exactly what I heard, that dragging walk. Then I heard soft baby giggles. Eli's laughter. It's pretty distinct. He had this bubbly little giggle that kind of came in bursts. So I'm like, oh, Maya's home. Cool. I figured she was in the living room playing with him. I waited for her to come into my room and bug me, because she usually did, but she never came. After maybe half an hour, I got up to see what they were doing. I stepped out into the hallway, and it was quiet. No Maya, just the TV on low in the living room. Then she turned to me and said, very carefully, "Did you hear that too?" I got chills immediately, but I played dumb. I was like, "Hear what?" She said, "Maya's footsteps. I thought she came home, and I thought Eli was awake. I heard him laughing." I just stared at her and told her, "I heard the footsteps, and I heard him laughing too." We both turned and looked at Eli together. He was knocked out in his little bassinet, completely asleep. Had been the whole time. That was the first time someone else in the house described hearing the exact same thing as me, at the same time. The white figure. Okay, now jump to my freshman year of high school, 2021. Masks were still being recommended, but not everyone was wearing them anymore. I wore mine religiously, not even for health reasons at that point. I was just anxious and insecure and felt safer behind it. I barely took it off, even to eat, which I know sounds dramatic, but that's where I was mentally. Anyway, one day I came home absolutely starving and exhausted. Nobody else was home yet. I sat down at our dining table with some food, just zoning out. Now, the house was small. I want to emphasize that. Like, if someone was in there with you, you'd know. There weren't really places to hide. I was sitting there, looking down at my phone, when out of the corner of my eye, on my right side, I saw something. A white figure. It wasn't detailed. It was more like a streak or a shape. It moved fast, from the far corner of the room to another corner that I couldn't see fully without turning my whole head. I didn't give myself any time to overthink. I just stood up immediately and walked, almost ran, to the corner where I thought it went. Nobody. Nothing. No open windows. No curtains moving. I checked every obvious hiding spot, even though I knew deep down it wasn't a person. In a house that small, if someone was messing with me, they would have been caught in, like, 2 seconds. I remember just standing there, in the silence, my heart racing, trying to convince myself I was just tired. That's what I kept telling myself. You're hungry. You're exhausted. You're anxious. You're seeing things. But it didn't feel like seeing things. It felt like I'd walked in on something that didn't expect to be seen. The basement and the hand. Early 2022 was when my whole family got COVID. Somehow, I was the only one who didn't test positive. So instead of isolating them, they isolated me. Lucky me, I got sent to the basement. The basement was unfinished. One of the long walls was made of the same stone as that old stone house next door. You could literally see the rough, uneven blocks. It always felt colder along that wall. There was a stuffy little room down there with a walk-in closet. The closet didn't have a door, just an open doorway, and it was crammed full of the homeowner's old stuff. Boxes of clothes, random furniture, all that. I slept on a mattress on the floor in that room. When I lay down, my head faced the open closet. There was no avoiding it. It was right in my line of sight. I turned off the main light in the room, but left the closet light on, so I wouldn't feel completely in the dark. Under that light, there was a simple wooden chair sitting in the middle of the closet, like it was waiting for someone. I remember lying there on my back, just staring at one of the legs of the chair. It was like my body was too tired to move, but my brain wouldn't shut up. I started to feel this weird heaviness, like I was pinned to the mattress. Then, in those few seconds that felt much longer, I saw it. A hand. It held there for maybe 3 seconds. Then it let go. My whole body went ice cold. And here's the weirdest part. Instead of screaming or running upstairs, I just shut down. I rolled over, pulled the blanket up, and forced myself to sleep. It's like my brain decided the safest thing to do was pretend it hadn't happened. Later that year, my dad built me a small bedroom in what used to be part of the living room, right in the spot where I'd seen that white figure run to before. And that new room? It was directly above the basement room with the stone wall and that closet. I remember realizing that and just thinking, of course it's the same spot. The glass and the joke. About a year ago, before we moved out, I had my friend Jasmine over. We were hanging out in the basement, and I started telling her about all the creepy things I'd experienced in that house. I was being a little theatrical on purpose because she gets scared easily, and yes, I love her, but I also find her reactions hilarious. We decided to go back upstairs, so I bolted up the stairs and she followed behind me, clinging to the railing. We got to the main floor, and I kept going, talking louder than I usually would about the ghost in the house. Normally, I never talk about it out loud like that. I always had this superstition, like if I acknowledged it too much, whatever it was would know that I knew. But this time, I was showing off a little, I guess. I said something kind of mean about how the ghost probably looked, like a dumb, petty little insult about its appearance. I was joking, but yeah, not my smartest moment. Right as the words left my mouth, a glass food container flew off the table. And I don't mean it slid. I don't mean it rolled. I mean it came off the top of this fruit stand thing we had, the highest part of the table, and shattered on the floor right next to where my baby sister Rosa was standing. The sound of the glass breaking snapped everything into slow motion. I ran to her immediately, checking for cuts, for blood, anything. She was fine. She hadn't even processed what happened, but there were glass shards everywhere. I stood there shaking, because I remembered putting that container on the top tier of the fruit stand earlier. There was no way Rosa could have reached it. She was tiny. Even now she's small, but back then, no chance. Jasmine was pale and wide-eyed, and I didn't even try to joke anymore. I just cleaned up the glass and quietly decided I would never talk about that ghost like that again. Leaving the house. Not long after that, around April 2024, we finally moved into our own house. Ever since we left that place, nothing has happened. No footsteps, no bells, no white figures, no hands on chair legs. It's been quiet. And I didn't realize how loud that other house felt until we were gone. Whenever I talk about it with my aunt and uncle, Tia Carmen and Uncle Luis, they both insist it was just the basement. They say there wasn't enough light, most of the windows were blocked, and my brain was filling in the gaps. And honestly, I get that. I've watched horror movies since I was like 10 years old. I don't scare easily. I can sit in the dark basement with the lights off and be fine, for a little while. But in that house, I could never stay down there too long. There was always this feeling, like someone was watching me from a corner I couldn't quite see. I know how all of this sounds. I know people can explain a lot of things away with, "You were tired," or "You're into horror, so your mind plays tricks on you," or "Old houses are creaky." Maybe they're right about some of it. All I can say is this. In that little house, 30 steps from the first stone house in the city, something was there with us. And I swear on my life, every single thing I just told you really did happen to me. Okay, so I'm just going to talk to you like you're here with me, because honestly, I'm still shaking even thinking about this. These last few months have been rough, like really rough. I live at home with my parents, my mom Elena and my stepdad Mark, and something's been going on in the house that we can't really explain anymore. At this point, paranormal is the only word that feels close, even if it sounds dramatic. It started small. It always does, right? First, it was the lights. I thought it was just bad wiring or dodgy bulbs. The bathroom light would flicker, then the one in the hallway, sometimes the one over the kitchen sink. They'd flick off and on like someone was playing with the switch. We changed all the bulbs, even had a friend who's an electrician take a quick look and, yeah, still happening. Mostly in the bathroom and hallway. It's like those two places are, I don't know, favorite spots. Then our cats started acting weird. We've got 3 of them now, Luna, Milo, and Pepper. They've always been pretty chill, the usual zoomies at 3 a.m., but nothing wild. But lately, they'll just freeze and stare into the corner of a room like they're watching someone move around. Sometimes they'll hiss at the empty doorway. Luna arches her back and her fur stands up, and there's just nothing there. At least, nothing we can see. And then we started hearing things. The first thing I heard was this growl. It was stupidly late, middle of the night, and I was half asleep. It came from the hallway outside my bedroom door. It was low, deep, like it came from someone's chest rather than an animal. It absolutely scared the life out of me. Our cats can't make a noise like that. And yeah, one of the windows in the living room was open a crack, but it wasn't windy, And this didn't sound like something from outside. It sounded inside. My parents hear things too. My mom's told me she hears me calling her name sometimes, like I'm shouting for her from my room. And when she goes to check on me, I'm just wearing my headphones, minding my own business. Mark says he once heard me crying in the bathroom, but I was at work when that happened. The worst for him, though, was the voice. He was in the kitchen one evening, washing dishes, and he swears a man's voice, really clear and close, said, "Hello," right behind him. Just that. Hello. No one else heard it. Mom was in the living room, I was in my room, and he kind of came in white as a sheet. Mark's not the type to spook easily. He's very, "It's probably nothing," about everything, but he was genuinely shaken. That's what scared me, seeing him scared. There are other sounds too. I've heard faint music at night, like someone's playing an old radio in another room. It's sort of muffled, like a lullaby or some slow song you can't quite catch the words to. And knocking. 3 knocks in a row, sometimes on the wall near my bed, sometimes from the inside of the wardrobe door. It mostly happens after midnight, when everything's quiet and you can't pretend you didn't hear it. Then there's the physical stuff. Both Mark and I have been touched. He told me he was in the kitchen one afternoon, waiting for the kettle to boil, and he felt a hand run slowly down his back. Naturally, he thought it was my mom messing around. But when he turned, she was at the table scrolling through her phone, nowhere near him. He didn't even tell us that story until recently, because he didn't want to freak us out. A lot of the time, it feels like there's something sitting between my shoulder blades, just this constant weight on my back, pressing down. Even when nothing else is happening, that feeling hangs around. We've both been scratched, too. I only found out recently that Mark had been scratched on his upper arm. 3 thin lines, like something had clawed him. He was in the laundry room when it happened. He said it stung all of a sudden, and when he checked, there were these red marks and a bit of blood. For me, it was my side, just under my ribs. I was getting changed and felt this burning sensation. When I looked in the mirror, there were 3 long scratches running diagonally across my skin. Not deep enough to bleed, but red and raised like a fresh cat scratch. Except none of the cats were in my room, and I definitely hadn't done it myself. A few nights ago was one of the worst moments. I got up around 2 a.m. to get some water. The house was dark and quiet, and you know that feeling when the air just feels thick? Like you're walking into a room where people have just been arguing? It felt like that. I stepped into the hallway, and this horrible awareness hit me, like something was already watching me from the far end. So I stopped. I looked down the hallway toward the front door, and right by the coat rack, just behind it, I saw something lean out. Not all the way, just enough to look at me. It was tall, taller than Mark, easy, and it was basically a shadow. No face, no features, just a human-shaped darkness with a kind of edge to it, like the air bent around it. It didn't move. It just stared. My whole body went cold. I genuinely thought I was going to throw up. I couldn't look away for a few seconds, and then my fight or flight just cut out, and I stumbled back into my room, shut the door, and sat on the floor shaking. I didn't even get the water. Things move on their own now, too. One afternoon I was at my desk, and I heard a thump right above my head. The shelf above my desk holds my albums and a couple of little figures. Out of nowhere, 3 of my albums just slid forward and fell to the floor. The window was closed, no trucks going by, no one stomping around. The weird part is, they fell in the opposite direction of how they were leaning. It was like someone pushed them deliberately. In the bathroom, we've got one of those circular ring towel holders fixed to the wall. I was in the shower one morning, door closed, no one else in there, and I heard this rattling metal sound. I peeked out, and the ring was swinging from side to side, like someone had just yanked the towel and let it go. It kept going for longer than it should have, like it had a bit too much energy behind it. On top of all this, my mood has been all over the place. I mean, I've been stressed about other stuff too. Life, work, normal things. But this feels different. I go from fine to angry to crying to numb in the span of a day. Little things set me off. I'm snapping at people, then apologizing 5 minutes later. Since all of this started, my sleep's gone to hell. I've been having these vivid nightmares where I'm stuck in my room and something is crouched under my bed, whispering my name. Sometimes I wake up and I'm not sure if I can move right away, like I'm pinned down. It feels like I'm being watched pretty much constantly, like I can't relax in my own home. Honestly, after I did that, it seemed to get worse. The noises were louder. The shadows felt closer. I started waking up more often with that pressure on my shoulders. We've never tried to invite anything into our home. We're not doing Ouija boards or summoning rituals or anything like that. We've had a few odd things happen in the past, like lights flickering on the anniversary of a family member's death, but it always felt gentle, like a loved one checking in. This is not that. This feels heavy and wrong and angry. And the worst part is, it feels like I'm the one getting most of it. Like whatever this is has decided I'm the main target. I don't know why. There are probably more little things I'm forgetting. Cold spots, footsteps when everyone's in bed, doors that are open when we're sure we closed them. But my head is kind of scrambled just talking about it. I'm scared all the time. Genuinely. I walk around my own house and my chest feels tight, like I can't get a full breath in. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm tired, I'm frightened, and it feels like I don't have anywhere safe to just exist. I keep hoping I'll wake up one day and it'll all just stop, but it hasn't yet. And that's why I'm telling you this, because I needed someone to hear it, to understand that I'm not just being dramatic or imagining things. So yeah, that's what's been happening in our house. So, this happened last winter, on a trip to a hill station with two of my friends, Kabir and Nina. We were there for 4 days, and on the third morning, Kabir shook me awake at around 3:30 a.m. I remember blinking at him like, "Are you serious right now?" And he goes, "Sunrise trek, viewpoint, come on." Nina had a slight fever and refused to get up, so it ended up being just the two of us. We layered up, thermals, hoodies, whatever we could find, and stepped out into this sharp, biting cold. You know the kind that hits your face and suddenly you're wide awake? The whole town was asleep. The sky was this deep, inky blue, and the streetlights were patchy, some flickering, some completely dead. The trail to the viewpoint started just beyond the last row of houses. It was technically a marked path, but it felt completely abandoned. On both sides, the forest just swallowed everything. Tall pines leaning in, branches hanging low, like they were eavesdropping. It was so quiet that every crunch of gravel and dry leaves under our shoes sounded wrong, too loud. We kept following these old wooden signboards, viewpoint 2.3 kilometers, then viewpoint 1.8 kilometers. But every time we checked the map on Kabir's phone, it weirdly felt like the blue dot had barely moved. You know that glitchy, laggy feeling where your brain starts going, "Are we moving, or is the map messing with us?" At some point, I got this really strong feeling that we weren't alone. Like something in the trees was keeping pace with us. I couldn't see anything, just layers of black and dark green, but it felt aware. Then we zoomed out on the map, and that's when we realized the trail we were on passed right between an old British-era cemetery and a Hindu cremation ground, both hidden behind the tree line. They weren't visible from the road, but they were right there on the map. And that changed everything. Suddenly the air felt heavier. We started noticing how some parts of the road had these weak yellow lights, and other parts were just swallowed by this thick darkness. The kind of dark where your phone torch feels like a joke. We thought about turning back, but we'd already walked so far in, and the idea of trying to navigate back through that darkness, without really knowing the way, felt somehow even scarier. So we kept going, walking faster, not really talking anymore. That's when the dogs showed up. 4 of them. No collars, no tags. They just appeared out of the shadows ahead of us, like they'd been waiting. At first, we froze. Stray dogs at that hour, on a lonely road, can go either way, right? Attack you? Ignore you? You don't know. But these ones didn't growl or anything. 2 of them went ahead of us, trotting calmly, and the other 2 fell in behind us. It was so deliberate, like a formation. Kabir and I just looked at each other, and without even saying it out loud, we decided to trust them. As we walked, they stayed with us. When we slowed down, they slowed down. When we stopped, they turned back to look at us, like, why are we stopping? Every time there was some weird sound from the forest, a crack, a rustle, something, one of them would bark in that direction, short and alert, and the others would suddenly go tense. After a while, the road itself changed. It went from concrete to this rough, broken track, and eventually it just faded out. Like the mountain had decided, that's enough road, no more. In front of us, there was just blackness. No path, no markers, just a steep drop into trees and fog and nothing we could see. Beyond the last broken bit of road, my phone torch just got eaten by the dark. They started barking at that darkness. Not normal barking. This was frantic, angry, almost desperate. They were standing right at the edge of where the road ended, hackles raised, teeth bared, barking at nothing. There was nothing we could see. No animal, no movement. Just empty air and black space. And I don't know how to explain this, but whatever they were reacting to, it felt wrong. Like if we stepped past that point, we'd be stepping into something we weren't supposed to touch. That was it for us. We didn't even talk it through. Kabir just said, "We're going back." And I was like, "Yes, right now." The moment we turned around, the dogs did too. Same formation, 2 ahead, 2 behind. This time, though, they were more alert, pausing at random spots, sniffing the air, staring into the trees for a second too long. We didn't run, but it felt like we were constantly on the edge of it. The strange thing was, on the way back, we barely saw any of the signboards we remembered. It was like the trail was shorter, or different. We just kept walking, following the dogs, until suddenly the forest thinned out, and we were back near the first houses of the town. By then it was around 6 in the morning. The sky was turning lighter, that pale bluish gray you get right before sunrise. The streets were still empty, shutters down, no one around. We sat down near this closed tea stall, completely drained. The dogs sat with us. One curled up right at my feet. Another flopped next to Kabir. They weren't restless anymore, just there, calm, waiting. At around 6:15, one of the shops finally opened. We got some biscuits and water, and of course, the first thing we did was share the biscuits with the dogs. They ate them happily, tails wagging, but still stayed close, like they were on duty. Right then, this man rode by on a brown horse, like straight out of another era. He looked like a local, with this thick jacket and a scarf wrapped around his face. He slowed down when he saw us and asked where we were headed. We told him we'd tried to go to the viewpoint but turned back, and he said, "Now there's enough light. If you still want to go, I can take you. It's not safe in the dark." We turned around to gesture at the dogs, like, "We're okay, they were with us." And they were gone. Just like that. No paws trotting away. no tails disappearing around a corner. They were there 1 second, and the next second, there was nothing. The street was completely empty. Later, when I got back home and told my mom the whole story, she didn't react the way I expected. I thought she'd laugh or call us dramatic. Instead, she got really quiet. Then she said, "You should never walk near graveyards or cremation grounds at that hour. At night, there are things that roam freely, dark things." She looked straight at me and asked, "What if something had followed you home? What if one of you had gotten possessed? There were only 2 of you. What would you have done?" And that question, that's the part that still gets to me. I can handle the creepy trail and the weird map. Hey everyone, welcome to Paranormal M. Long day, huh? Now we finally get to chill together and dive into some creepy paranormal stories. I'm really excited to be here with you guys. I seriously love doing this. So don't be shy. Feel free to share your own paranormal experiences with us too. Before we jump into today's stories, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Alright, let's get into it. So, let me tell you a story. Back in college, I was living with my mom's mom. We all called her Nana June. It was just the 2 of us in this old house a little ways outside of town. I was juggling a full course load and working evenings at this really busy cookie and coffee shop. Because I was usually out late, we had this little ritual. Every night when I got home, I'd pop my head into her room, tell her I was back, and give her a kiss goodnight. She went to bed early, so it felt important to both of us to have that tiny check-in. One weekend day, this was around 2018, I was home in the middle of the day. I went to the bathroom, sat down, scrolling my phone like we all do, when I suddenly heard this sound. 7 sharp knocks. Not on the bathroom door, but on the wall right next to it. Rapid, evenly spaced. Then a short. Then 7 knocks again. 7 more. So in total, 3 sets of 7 knocks, all in the exact same rhythm. It was so weirdly deliberate that I actually froze for a second. I called out, "Hello?" thinking maybe it was Nana messing with me or that she needed help. Nothing. No reply. No footsteps walking away. No sound of anyone moving at all. When I finished up and came out, I walked through the house expecting to see her nearby. Instead, there was Nana June, sitting calmly at the kitchen table at the far end of the house, pen in hand, going through her bills. I asked, "Hey, did you just knock on the wall while I was in the bathroom?" She looked at me like I'd asked whether she'd just flown in through the ceiling. "No," she said. "I've been sitting here. Why?" Now, if she had needed something, she would have just called my name or walked over and knocked directly on the door. She was not a 3 sets of 7 mysterious knocks kind of person. Honestly, she was way more likely to open the door and say, "You done yet? I need to talk to you," and then wander off. I'd lived in that house almost 10 years at that point, and I'd never heard a noise like that before, and I haven't since. But I ended up writing it off as some weird house noise. Pipes, wood settling, whatever. I'm a skeptic by default, so I just kind of shrugged and moved on. The next day, nothing happened. Totally normal. Day 3. A couple of days later, on a weekday, I did my usual. Classes all day, then straight to work, then home around 10 p.m. I went to do our nightly routine, poke my head into Nana June's room, tell her I was home, kiss goodnight. As I walked in, she immediately said, "Have you been home today?" I told her no, I'd been at school and then at work. She frowned a little and said, "Well, I've been hearing doors slam all day. If I'm in the living room, they slam on the other side of the house. If I'm back here, I hear them up front." Now, her bed was against an exterior wall, and on the other side of that wall, a half level down outside, there was a door to the crawl space. In storms, that door sometimes blew open and would slam in the wind over and over. So my first thought was, okay, that's probably it again. So I said, maybe it's the crawlspace door. I'll go check. She shook her head and said, it didn't sound like that. It sounded like it was inside. But go look if it makes you feel better. I went outside with a flashlight. The crawlspace door was shut tight, latched, with our usual stack of bricks in front of it for extra insurance. No wind, no storm, no movement. Totally still. I came back and told her, door's shut. Everything's fine. She rolled her eyes and snorted. Please, she said. There's no such thing. She was, and still is, extremely not into anything paranormal. We said goodnight and went to sleep. The next day, again, totally uneventful. Day 5, evening. By day 5, I had another long school plus work day. It was summer, so it was still a little warm out when I drove home, got in around 10 p.m., and headed straight to Nana June's room, like always. I barely pushed the door open before she said, kind of accusingly, "Why didn't you come say hey before you went to work?" I stopped. What? I didn't. I just got home. She shook her head. No, you were here, around 6. I wasn't feeling good, so I got in bed early. I was lying here in the dark with the door open, and I saw you. You opened the door across the hall, turned the light on, stood there for a second, turned the light back off, and closed the door. I figured you forgot your wallet or something. You should have come say hello to your Nana before you left. The room she was talking about was the spare bedroom directly across the hall from her door. I hadn't been home at all. I told her that. I was genuinely confused and starting to feel... I asked, "Are you sure you didn't drift off and dream it?" She was very firm. I wasn't asleep. I can't fall asleep that fast. I watched it happen. She still laughed it off like it was just weird, but I could tell she thought I might be lying to her about not coming home. I, on the other hand, was quietly freaking out. Between the knocks, the phantom slamming doors, and now this, it was starting to feel like a pattern. We didn't have any answers though, so we both went to bed. Day 5, night. That same night is when things really tipped over into, okay, what is happening? It was around 2 a.m. when I woke up to the sound of a dog barking. Non-stop. Loud enough to yank me right out of sleep. The thing is, Nana's dog, a little terrier mix named Benny, almost never barked. I'd known him for 3 years at that point, and I could count on one hand the number of times I'd heard him make more than a tiny woof. He didn't bark at deer, or stray cats, or delivery people. Nothing. He was just a quiet little guy. So for him to be barking non-stop, that alone was weird. At first, half asleep, I assumed he was in Nana's room, like he usually was at night. I rolled out of bed and shuffled to my doorway. That's when I realized the sound wasn't coming from her side of the hall at all. It was coming from the other direction, toward the living room and kitchen. All our doors were open because it was hot, so I could see down the hallway as I walked. The house was dark and still. When I got to the living room, I finally saw him. There was Benny, standing in the doorway between the living room and the kitchen, front paws planted, body tense, staring straight into the pitch-black kitchen and barking like his life depended on it. It wasn't a, "Hey, I heard a noise," bark. It was this intense, focused, almost protective barking, like he was trying to warn something off or alert someone. I just stood there for a second, watching this little dog I'd never seen like that before, barking and staring into a dark kitchen. Then I whispered, "Benny." The second I said his name, he stopped. Just cut off mid-bark. He turned his head slowly to look at me, then sat down, tail still, ears up. Calm, like someone had flipped a switch. Then he looked away from me, not back into the center of the kitchen, but up and to his right, into this small nook between our piano and a glass front cabinet. I knew that spot really well. It was just big enough for a person to stand in, almost like a little shadowy alcove. That was the moment I felt it. I don't know how else to describe this without sounding dramatic, but I'm a skeptic, and this is still one of the clearest physical reactions I've ever had. It was like a wave of cold started at my ankles, shot up my spine, over my head, and then down the front of my body to my toes. I could feel it move. The whole house was quiet. The kitchen was just this black square in front of us. Benny was sitting there, calmly looking at that exact spot like he was watching something. I didn't say anything clever. I didn't try to investigate. After a moment, I just said, "Come on, Benny." He immediately stood up and followed me back down the hall. I got into bed, pulled the covers up, and tried very, very hard to pretend none of that had just happened. After that night, everything stopped. No more knocks. No more phantom door slams. No more lights turning on and off when no one was home. The house just went back to normal. Later on, I told this whole story to friends and coworkers, and people came up with explanations. Some said the knocks were probably pipes or an animal in the walls. Thing is, we had an exterminator, and they never found anything, before or after. There was no water running when the knocks happened, and I never heard that same pattern of knocks again in over a decade in that house. Others said, maybe your grandmother was dreaming or getting details mixed up. She could have dozed off and dreamed about the light and the doors, sure, but she was always a night owl, always had trouble falling asleep, and her memory was sharp, confirmed by her doctors. To this day, years later, she's still mentally solid and has never had experiences like that before or since. Then there's Benny. People say, dogs hear things we don't. Maybe he saw a raccoon or something outside. But remember, he never barked at the actual deer and foxes that came through the yard. And when I looked toward the kitchen, the motion-activated lights outside were not on, which they normally would be if something had moved out there. One of my friends, I'll call her Camille, she's from Louisiana, told me something that weirdly stuck with me. She said she'd always heard that sometimes spirits pass through places. They're not necessarily stuck there or haunting it. They just move through, like travelers. That idea made sense to me in a way I can't fully explain, especially because before all this, Nana June's husband had passed away, and out of principle, she never wound the old grandfather clock he'd loved. Yet every so often, it would chime anyway. No one had touched it. Is that related? I have no idea. Could it all be coincidence and misinterpretation? Absolutely. The rational part of me still leans that way. But I can't fully shake the memory of Benny standing in that doorway, barking into a dark kitchen like he was trying to warn something off, and then calmly staring up into that little nook, as if someone was standing there, watching us. So, I don't know what was going on in that house for those few days. All I know is, I'm not quick to call things paranormal, but if anything I've ever experienced deserves the label weird, it's that week living with Nana June and Benny in a house that suddenly didn't feel quite as empty as it looked. So, okay, let me just talk to you like we're sitting on a porch swing, because that's honestly what this feels like. I grew up on this little patch of land in eastern Kansas. It's not like way out in the wilderness, but it's country. Our place is an old farmhouse with peeling paint, a crooked barn, a couple of sheds that probably shouldn't be standing anymore, and a trail that runs down to a strip of woods we call the timber. There's a creek down there, and a fire pit where we've had a lot of late-night talks and burned a lot of marshmallows. We technically have 2 ponds. One of them is still there, ringed with trees and cattails and mosquitoes that live to make me suffer. The other one? Well, it's basically a scar in the earth now. Just a dried-up basin choked with brush and dead weeds. That one has always felt wrong to me. I didn't have words for it as a kid. Just that feeling you get where your body kind of says, hey, maybe let's not. When I was younger, like middle school younger, I used to bone hunt. That was my thing. I was that edgy kid who thought picking up old bones was cool and mysterious. I'd wander around our 80-ish acres and bring back skulls, vertebrae, ribs, just whatever I found. At the time, it was fun. Now, looking back, the amount of bones I dragged home honestly freaks me out a little. Like, why were there so many? Anyway, that dried-up pond was one of my favorite places to explore, even though it made me nervous. The brush around it is thick, and when you climb down, it feels like the rest of the world just kind of disappears. Sounds get muffled. The air feels heavier. One Easter Sunday, back when I was about 14, I decided to go for a walk by myself. Everyone else was inside finishing up lunch and arguing about who was doing dishes. I headed down the trail, past the barn, cut across the field, and ended up at that dry pond. The whole way there, I had this gnawing feeling in my gut. Not full-on panic, just that subtle dread, like when a storm is about to roll in and the air feels electric. I talked myself out of it, like, you're just being dramatic. It's fine. I slid down into the old pond bed and started picking my way through the brush, looking for bones because, of course, I was. That's when I saw it. A severed cow leg. Just lying there. No body, no skull. Just the leg, half buried, like it had been there for a while. Near it, half covered in dirt and leaves, was this metal spur. Old, rusted, but still solid. I picked it up and wiped it off, and on the side, there were 3 little crosses engraved, neat and deliberate. I'd been to that pond a bunch of times, and I had never seen that thing before. I brought it back to the house and showed my Grandma June. She took one look at the spur, at those 3 crosses, and her eyes started to water. Then she just quietly started crying. I asked her what was wrong, and she said, "Your Uncle David, his favorite song was 3 wooden crosses. He passed away before I was born, so I never knew him, but I've heard stories." Seeing her cry over that spur, after I just randomly dug it out of the dirt by a dead cow leg, yeah, that stuck with me. Fast forward a few years. Last year, I headed out to the other pond, the one closer to the front of the property that still has water. I just wanted to walk, clear my head. It was late afternoon, sun starting to go gold, that pretty time of day where everything looks soft and safe. Our neighbors are pretty far off, and I know what their dogs sound like. This wasn't them. I kept going anyway, because I'm stubborn, and also because horror movie survival instincts have clearly never fully developed in me. As I got closer to the pond, the bushes and trees around it got denser, and then I started noticing the brush moving. Not just a little. It was swaying like something big was pushing through it. Then one of the bigger trees near the bank started shaking. Not just its leaves, but the actual trunk, like something heavy had bumped or grabbed it. That was my, okay, nope, moment. My whole body went cold, and every instinct I had screamed, leave. So I turned around and walked briskly, definitely not running, but kind of running, back to the house. That's the thing about this place, though. Daytime is weird enough. Nighttime is worse. I dream about this property constantly. The house, the barns, the timber, that dried pond. All of it shows up in my dreams over and over. I don't have any other recurring locations in my dreams, just here. Sometimes it's normal, sometimes it's twisted, hallways too long, doors where there shouldn't be doors, things watching from the fields. A lot of my worst nightmares take place in my own yard. And at night, when I'm awake, yeah, I don't go out there alone anymore. If I do step outside, I stay close to the house, on the porch or in the yard. I've tried to wander further, but I always end up turning back. I either hear some strange sound, or I get that heavy, crushing feeling of dread, like something is focused on me, waiting. We've got coyotes around, and I know what they sound like. This is different. It's quieter, or too smooth, or wrong. This past August, my partner Eli was staying over. One night we got bored and decided to do clown makeup and go stargazing, because obviously that's a totally normal date night. Eli put on my jester outfit and I pulled on my own clown costume. They asked me to do their makeup a really specific way. Sharp lines, big smile, lots of black around the eyes, and we were cracking up the whole time. Once we were all painted up, we grabbed a blanket and climbed to the top of the hill next to the house. It's the best place on the property to see the sky. The stars were already coming out, and we put on some music, just lying there, clown faces to the universe. But that weird feeling came back. Strong. The air felt thick. I kept glancing toward the timber, that dark line of trees at the edge of the field, and I could tell Eli was tense too. We tried to ignore it, but both of us were getting that "we should not be here" vibe. Then we saw it. Down by the timber, where the field fades into shadow, something pale moved. At first we thought it was just light on the grass, but then it kept going, fast, low to the ground. It was running on all fours. The shape was wrong for any animal I know. Too long in some places, too short in others. Humanoid, but not. No clothes, no fur, just this pale, almost glowing shape sprinting along the tree line. We both saw it. We didn't talk. We just looked at each other, grabbed the blanket and the speaker, and booked it back to the house. We locked the doors and sat in the living room for a long time, makeup smudged, just listening. Later that month, we had a bonfire down at the timber. Me, Eli, and a few friends. We stayed way later than we planned, laughing, telling stories, feeding the fire. It was one of those nights that feels weirdly perfect, where you don't notice how dark it's getting because you're so caught up in the moment. I said, "Hey, maybe we should head back," trying to sound casual, but everyone could hear my voice shaking. We all rushed to pack up. On the way out, as we were leaving the timber, Eli stopped and grabbed my arm. Later, they told me they'd seen another pale deal in the brush just off the trail. Different shape than the one from the hill. Shorter, they said, but with longer arms. Just standing there between the branches. They didn't tell anyone else till we were back at the house. And then there was last night. It was close to sunset, that time where the sky is half gold, half purple. I went outside to take out the trash, walked toward the bins, and something made me stop and look out over the field facing the timber. At first I thought my eyes were just playing tricks on me. There was something pale standing out there, in the middle of the field. Too far to see clearly, but I could tell it wasn't just a fence post or a hay bale. It looked upright, still, watching. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked again. It was still there. I got this sudden urge to grab my phone and take a picture, like I needed proof I wasn't imagining it. I ran back inside, grabbed my phone, and when I came back out, maybe 30 seconds later, it was gone. No movement, no sound. Just empty field and the timber in the distance. So that's where I'm at. This land is my home. I've grown up here. I know its smells and its sounds, and the way the wind moves through the trees. I love it, and I'm scared of it. I don't know if there's something out here that doesn't want us wandering at night, or if my brain is stitching together a lifetime of weird experiences into a story that makes sense. All I know is, the bones, the spur with the 3 crosses, the dreams, the wrong-sounding dog, the moving trees, the pale things in the dark. They're real to me. I've seen them. I've felt them. And I have no idea what they are. Okay, so let me take you back a bit. It was the late 2000s, and I was in this fairly new relationship with a guy. I'll call him Mark. We'd only been together a few months when I found out I was pregnant. We were both young, still kind of fumbling our way through adulthood, and then life just escalated really fast. At the same time, Mark's mom, let's call her Ellen, was dying. She had advanced cancer, and by the time I came into their lives, it was already pretty far along. I wasn't working then, so I naturally became the person who spent a lot of time with her. It started small, just keeping her company while Mark was at work or dealing with errands. But it turned into more. I'd organize her meds, sit with her through those endless appointments, help her get dressed on her bad days. We'd watch reruns on TV, drink 2 sweet tea because she liked it that way, and just talk. Or sometimes we didn't talk at all. We'd just share the silence. You know when you meet someone late in their life, but you can still feel who they were, like before the illness? That was her. She had this dry, almost mischievous humor, even when she was exhausted. I remember thinking, if I'd met her 10 years earlier, I probably would have wanted to be her friend, not just her son's girlfriend. As my belly grew, she just lit up whenever I walked into the room. She'd put her hand on my stomach and joke with the baby, telling them to hurry up so I can see your little face. There was this bittersweetness hanging over everything. We all kind of knew she wasn't going to get much time, if any, with her grandchild. But no one said that out loud. I ended up giving birth about 3 weeks before she died. It was a little girl, my daughter, Maya, and Ellen was able to meet her once, maybe twice. I remember bringing this tiny little bundle into her bedroom. Ellen was so weak by then that we had to prop her up with pillows, and she still insisted on fixing her hair before I handed the baby over. That made me smile. She held Maya so carefully, like she was holding something sacred. Her hands were shaking, but she just stared at Maya's face with this expression that was, I don't know, peaceful. Like something in her had loosened. I will never stop being grateful for that moment, that they got to exist in the same room, even for such a short time. Not long after that, Ellen passed away. And as for Mark and me, well, we didn't make it. By the time Maya was a few months old, the cracks that had been there all along just got bigger. Sleep deprivation, grief, stress, none of that helps a young relationship. When Maya was about 2 months old, we split up. It wasn't dramatic, just heartbreaking in that quiet, practical way. He ended up moving across the country. For a bunch of reasons, Maya didn't grow up with him or his side of the family around. No visits, no regular phone calls, no holidays with grandparents from that side. None of that. It was just me and her. So fast forward a bit. A few months after Ellen died, I had this dream. Now, when I say I had a dream, I don't mean one of those fuzzy things that vanish as soon as you wake up. This was different. It was the most vivid dream I've ever had. Honestly, it's still the clearest dream I can remember in my whole life. In the dream, I was standing in this place that looked like a hotel ballroom mixed with a garden. Big windows, soft light, people in the distance talking quietly, but I couldn't really see their faces. And then Ellen walked toward me. She was wearing this absolutely gorgeous green gown. I don't even know how to describe it properly. Like an old-fashioned ball gown, deep green, the kind of dress that moves almost like water when you walk. It was such a specific shade and such a striking image that even in the dream I noticed it. She came right up to me and hugged me. I could feel it, the weight, the warmth of her arms around me. It didn't feel like a dream hug. It felt real. And she said very clearly, "Thank you for everything, for taking care of me, for loving my son, for bringing my grandbaby here." I remember crying in the dream, and when I woke up, my pillow was wet. I could still smell her perfume, that faint, powdery floral scent she liked. I lay there in the dark thinking, what just happened? I'd never, before or since, had a dream like that. It stayed with me. It still does. Now, before all of this, Mark had left behind a few things at my place when he moved out. Clothes, some random stuff, and a small box with old photos. In that box, there was this framed picture of Ellen when she was young. Again, probably late 30s, maybe early 40s. She looked radiant. Big smile, bright eyes, hair done up, wearing a simple dress. Not the green gown from my dream, just a regular dress. I ended up hanging that photo on the wall in my bedroom, kind of off to the side. Not in some shrine-like way, just there. I didn't really think about it much. Life got busy, as it always does. Diapers and bills and daycare and all that. Years passed. My daughter grew into this funny, curious toddler, always into something, talking non-stop, asking a million questions about everything. She had never met Mark's family. I didn't talk about them with her, not because of any big drama, but because there just wasn't a reason. They weren't part of our day-to-day life, and she was still so little. One afternoon, when Maya was around 3, I was cleaning and rearranging things in my bedroom. You know those days when you suddenly decide every picture frame and poster has to move right now? It was one of those. I was pulling things down from the wall, posters, photos, random little frames, and laying them on the bed. Maya was bouncing around the room, helping, which mostly meant getting distracted by whatever I put down. At some point, I had taken Ellen's photo off the wall and set it on the bed without really thinking. I was busy fussing with a nail that wouldn't go in straight when I heard Maya behind me say, in this bright, happy voice, "Green Grandma!" I froze. I turned around, and there she was, holding Ellen's framed photo in both hands. She was grinning, completely delighted, like she just recognized an old friend. She tapped the glass with her little finger and said it again, very matter-of-fact. "Look, Mommy, it's Green Grandma." Now remember, this is a picture of Ellen as a young woman. She is not wearing green in the photo. She's just smiling in a simple, light-colored dress. There's nothing green in the picture at all. Nothing in the frame, nothing in the background. No green couch, no green wall, nothing. And I just stood there, feeling this weird wave move through me. It was like my body remembered the dream before my brain caught up. That dream. Ellen, younger, about that same age as in the photo. That beautiful green gown. Her hugging me and thanking me. The vividness of it, how real it felt. I hadn't talked to Maya about Ellen. Not once. I hadn't told her about the dream. There were no stories about the grandma who wore a green dress or anything like that. There was no way for her to connect that photo with the idea of green in any normal, logical way. So I asked her, trying to keep my voice steady, "Sweetie, why do you call her Green Grandma?" I stood there, staring at that photo, completely rattled, but not scared. It wasn't a scary feeling. It was more like wonder mixed with confusion. You have to understand, I'm generally pretty skeptical about paranormal stuff. I don't immediately jump to ghosts or spirits when something odd happens. I'm usually the one going, okay, but what's the actual explanation? I like things to make sense. But this is the one experience in my life that has made me seriously question what I think I know about reality. There was no logical coincidence I could come up with that felt satisfying. My daughter, who had zero contact with that side of the family and no information about Ellen, picked up a decades-old photo of a woman she'd never met and, out of nowhere, called her Green Grandma, using the one detail from a dream I'd had years earlier, a detail that existed only in my head. I still don't know what to make of it. I don't have some grand conclusion. I'm not here to tell anyone what to believe. All I can say is that, in that moment, it felt like Ellen had found a way to reach through time and space just a little bit. Maybe to let me know she was still around. Maybe to let me know she'd met her granddaughter in whatever way exists beyond us. Sometimes, when I see that old photo now, I still hear my daughter's little voice in my head, so cheerful, so sure. Green Grandma. So, this all happened pretty recently, and I'm honestly still a little shaken up. What's messing with me the most is that I'm the only one who hasn't actually seen anything. Everyone else has a story about me, except me. A few nights ago, it was really late, like close to midnight. I was in the kitchen with my mom, Elena, just leaning on the counter, talking about completely normal stuff. Work, bills, what we were going to make for dinner the next day. We hadn't moved from that spot for at least half an hour. My phone rang, and I saw it was my older brother, Marco, calling from down the hall. That was weird, because he was home too. Why not just walk over, right? I picked up, kind of joking, and before I could even say hello, he goes, "Why are you such an asshole?" I kind of laughed and went, "What are you talking about?" And his voice was dead serious. He said, "I just saw you peeking around the bathroom door while I was getting out of the shower. I only saw your eyes and the top of your head. As soon as I looked straight at you, you ducked back around the corner and disappeared." While he's saying this, my mom's standing right in front of me. I haven't left the kitchen. I told him, "It wasn't me. I've been here the whole time." And my mom backs me up immediately, like, "Yeah, they've been here with me. Nobody's gone anywhere." Marco went quiet. Then he just muttered something like, No, I saw you." And I could hear him lock the bathroom door. He's not a dramatic person at all. He's usually the one telling everyone else to calm down. But he sounded genuinely freaked out, to the point where he stayed in the bathroom for a while before coming out. I tried to explain it away. Bad reflections, weird shadows, steam, whatever. I didn't really believe my own explanation, but it was better than thinking the alternative. I probably would have just written it off as him being tired. Except it happened again. A couple of days later, my cousins came over. They're siblings, Lucas and Anna. We were all hanging out in the evening, and I was in the kitchen with Anna helping me with dinner, chopping vegetables and complaining about our jobs, the usual. Lucas went down the hallway to grab his backpack from the guest room. No big deal. A minute or two passed, and I heard him from down the hall say, in that sarcastic voice he uses, "Wow, very funny." I thought he'd found some old prank or something, so I didn't think much of it. But when he came back into the kitchen, he looked off. Not joking off. Kind of annoyed and unnerved at the same time. He looked straight at me and said, "Why were you trying to scare me?" I asked him what he meant, and he said, "You were sticking your head out from the corner by the garage door. I could only see your eyes. I thought you were going to jump out at me, so I walked over. But when I got there, you were gone." I told him I hadn't left the stove. I even pointed at the pan like, "Look, I'm literally stirring this." Anna backed me up, saying I'd been there the whole time. So then I told him what had happened to Marco in the bathroom. As I'm explaining that my brother saw the exact same thing, just my eyes peeking around a doorway. Lucas's face just drains of color. He's usually the "there's a logical explanation" guy, but he went completely quiet. I want to be clear about something. Neither Marco nor Lucas are prank people. They're both super straightforward. If they wanted to mess with me, they'd just say something dumb or tease me, not keep up some complicated lie about seeing my face in dark corners. They both told their stories separately, and the details lined up way too closely. And it doesn't stop there. My mom told me that even before all of this, before Marco's bathroom thing, before Lucas in the hallway, she'd been hearing me call her from down that same hallway. She said there were a few times where she'd hear my voice, clear as day, calling, "Mom?" from near the bedrooms. She'd answer, "Yeah?" and nothing. No footsteps, no follow-up, just silence. One time, she said she actually walked down the hall to see what I wanted. The lights were off, and my bedroom door was cracked open, so she knocked and pushed it a little. When she didn't see anyone, she just assumed I was in the bathroom or had moved to another room. Here's the thing that really got me. One of those times, I wasn't even home. I'd been out with friends all evening, and when I came back, she casually said something like, "Did you need something earlier? I heard you call me, but you never came in." We didn't piece it together until later, when all these stories started stacking on top of each other. So let me line this up. My mom hears me calling her from the hallway, once when I'm not even in the house. My brother sees me peeking around the bathroom door, just eyes and the top of my head, then disappearing. My cousin sees me doing the exact same thing near the garage, just my eyes around the corner, and then I'm suddenly back in the kitchen where I've supposedly been the whole time. Everyone has experienced some version of me in the hallway, except me. I haven't seen anything. I haven't heard anything that sounds like them. I'm just normal me, walking around, trying to convince everyone, and myself, that there's some rational explanation for this. But at this point, I don't know what to think. I don't feel a presence. I don't feel watched. I don't feel anything particularly spooky when I walk down that hallway. And somehow, that almost makes it worse. Because if it were obviously haunted, cold spots, weird vibes, that kind of thing, I could at least react to it. Instead, it's like there's this version of me that everyone else is dealing with, and I'm completely out of the loop. So yeah, right now, it honestly feels like I might be haunting my own family while I'm still alive. And I don't know what's more unsettling, the idea that something is pretending to be me, or the idea that, in some way I don't understand, it is me. You know, I keep going back and forth about whether I should even tell this story, because every time I say it out loud, it sounds made up. But it happened. At least, it felt like it did. So I'm just going to talk to you the way I'd talk to a friend over coffee, and let you decide what to make of it. So, this week I spent 4 nights in a little rental cabin out in a state forest. I'm 40, my husband Daniel is 36, and our kid Noah is 6. We wanted something low-key, just hiking, campfires, the whole unplugged from reality thing. The cabin itself was actually really nice. It wasn't one of those horror movie shacks. It had heating, clean sheets, a tiny kitchenette, even a little deck out back where you could see the stars through the trees. Everything felt totally normal the first night. Cozy, even. The second night is when things started to feel off, I guess. Noah and I were sleeping in the main bedroom, and Daniel took the little pull-out bed in the living area, because Noah's in that stage where he only sleeps well if he's next to Mom. You know how it is. We'd strung up these cheap battery-powered fairy lights along the headboard to use as a nightlight for him. Soft, warm little dots of light. Very Pinterest. We'd spent all day hiking, and logically, I should have been wiped out. But for whatever reason, I couldn't stay asleep. I kept waking up. No noise, no real reason. Just snap, suddenly wide awake, staring at the ceiling. Then I'd drift back off. Then wake up again. Over and over. The last time I woke up, I realized it was completely dark. At first, I thought my eyes just hadn't adjusted. I blinked a few times, waiting for the fairy lights to come into focus. And that's when it hit me. The lights were off. The batteries must have died while we were sleeping. And it was dark. That heavy, velvety kind of dark you only get in the middle of the woods, where there are no streetlights, no cars, nothing. Just black. Except, it wasn't completely black. The room was full of these glowing, white shapes. I know how that sounds. I do. But I'm going to describe them exactly how I remember seeing them. They looked like giant pieces of lace floating in the air. Not sheets, not blobs. Lace. Thin, flat, almost two-dimensional, like someone had cut intricate patterns out of glowing paper. They had geometric designs, loops, spirals, crisscrossing lines that reminded me of snowflakes and spiderwebs and old doilies, all mashed together. There were a lot of them, dozens maybe. They drifted slowly around the room, turning and folding in on themselves, as if they were exploring. One would curl near the ceiling, another would slide along the wall, another would sort of dip toward the floor and then float back up. It was like watching jellyfish, but made of light and lace. I remember just lying there, staring. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't even breathing hard. I felt this weird mixture of calm and absolute disbelief, like my brain just checked out for a second and went, "Okay, sure, we're doing this now." The oddest part was that I didn't feel threatened. Not really. If anything, the thought that popped into my head was, they don't know I'm awake. It was such a clear, instinctive feeling. Like I had walked into a room full of people who were talking and moving around, and they just hadn't noticed me yet. I had this sudden certainty that if I made a big noise or sudden movement, they would pay attention. And for whatever reason, that idea made me nervous. Right then, Noah sighed in his sleep and rolled over, bumping into me. That snapped me back to myself. I turned my head just slightly to make sure he was okay, and that's when one of the lace shapes drifted down between us. It hovered right there, in the space between my face and his. Up close, it was even more detailed. Little branching lines, tiny repeating patterns that almost shifted if I tried to focus on them. It wasn't solid. It was like looking at a pattern made of light itself. That was the moment I went from stunned to protective. My brain finally yelled, "Nope, I'm done with this." I remembered we had a small backup lantern on the chair next to the bed, the kind you twist to turn on. Moving as slowly as I could, I slid my hand out from under the blanket, feeling around for the chair. My fingers brushed the edge of it, then the handle of the lantern. The whole time, that lace thing was hovering between us, drifting just slightly, like it was watching Noah breathe. I wrapped my hand around the lantern, took a breath, and twisted it on. The second the light came on, the lace shapes vanished. No fade, no dissolving, no dramatic swirl. One instant they were everywhere, and the next second the room was just a plain wooden cabin bedroom with knotty pine walls and a very confused, half-awake me sitting there with a lantern in my hand. I sat there for a while, listening. The heater clicked softly. Noah's breathing stayed slow and steady. I could hear the trees outside in the wind. Everything was so normal that I started wondering if I'd had some kind of hyper-real dream. Eventually, I lay back down, still clutching the lantern, and somehow I fell asleep again. The next morning, I woke up to daylight coming through the curtains. No lace, no glow, no weird anything. Just Noah snoring softly, hair everywhere, the usual chaos. For a second I thought, Okay, yeah, that had to be a dream. It had to be. And then I noticed something. The lantern was still on. It had been on long enough that the batteries were almost dead. The light was weak and yellow, but it was definitely on. And I knew I hadn't turned it back on in the morning. I also knew I'd turned it on in the middle of the night. That was the part that made my stomach flip. Because if the lantern stayed on, then that means I was awake when I turned it on. Later, when we were packing up to go home, I mentioned to the woman at the little check-in office that I hadn't slept great, just making small talk. She joked that some people say one of the cabins a little farther down is haunted, but it's probably just squirrels and overactive imaginations. I almost told her. I almost said, "Hey, have you ever heard anyone talk about glowing lace things floating around their room?" But I didn't. I just smiled and nodded and kept it to myself. So here I am, telling you instead. I don't know what I saw. I don't have a neat explanation. I'd never even heard of anything that looks like what I saw. Those flat, patterned, glowing sheets drifting around like curious jellyfish made of embroidery. Maybe there's some logical thing, a brain glitch, a sleep hallucination, some weird trick of light my mind grabbed onto and exaggerated. Maybe. I'm open to that. But the feeling of the lantern in my hand, the shock of them disappearing, the way Noah shifted right before, all of that still feels very, very real. Anyway, that's my cabin story. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I just needed to say it out loud to someone. Make of it what you will, but if you ever wake up in the dark and see lace made of light floating around your room, please tell me, so I know I'm not completely losing it. So, let me tell you what happened, because I still get chills thinking about it. Today I woke up around, I think it was about 1 p.m. I'd gone to bed really late, so once I knocked out, that was it. No waking up in the middle of the night, no bathroom breaks, nothing. And just to be clear, I don't sleepwalk, never have. Nobody's ever seen me do anything like that. My mom, Clara, was in the little room at the end of the hallway. You know, the one we turned into kind of a home office/storage room. It's basically the third room in the apartment. She was sitting there scrolling on her phone, half working, half procrastinating. From where she was, she could see the doorway that leads to the kitchen. And at some point, she looks up and sees me walk past the kitchen doorway, heading toward the living room. At least, she thinks it's me. She told me later that it was the most normal thing in the world. I walked by, same haircut, same clothes she'd seen me wear before, same way of moving, just me. She assumed I was going to the living room window like I always do, to look outside and space out a bit. A minute later, she gets up and follows, expecting to see me standing by the window. Living room, empty. No TV on, no movement, nothing. Just an empty couch and the curtains barely moving. She's like, "Huh, that's weird." And then she gets this weird feeling in her stomach. So she walks down the hall, comes to my room, pushes the door open, and I'm there, completely knocked out, lying in bed in exactly the same position I'd been in before. Eyes closed, breathing slow, totally gone. She said in that moment her brain was just trying to make it make sense. Like, okay, maybe he walked back really fast and I just didn't hear it. But that would have meant I left the kitchen, crossed the living room, didn't make a single sound, sprinted back down the hallway, opened my bedroom door, climbed into bed, and perfectly recreated my sleeping position, all in the few seconds it took her to follow me. And I sleep in one of those narrow single beds against the wall, not some big soft thing you can fling yourself on dramatically. It would have been pretty obvious if I'd done that. She doesn't wake me up. She just kind of backs out of the room quietly, closes the door, and sits with it. You know that feeling when something doesn't add up, but your brain is like, let's just not think about that too hard. Anyway, about half an hour later, I actually wake up. I get out of bed, check my phone like a zombie, and wander into the kitchen to get some water. My mom is still in that third room. She looks up, sees me pass by the kitchen doorway again, and this time she lifts her hand and gives me a little wave. I wave back, kind of confused, but whatever, and keep going. She smiles, like she's relieved about something, but I don't think much of it. Only later in the evening does she finally sit down next to me and go, "Hey, can I ask you something kind of weird?" I'm like, sure? She goes, "Were you dreaming about walking around the house earlier? Or like, did you get up and then go back to sleep?" And I tell her, "No, I slept straight through. Why?" That's when she tells me the whole story. How she saw me in the kitchen, followed me to the living room, and I just wasn't there. How she checked my room and I was still asleep, looking exactly like I had been the whole time. A few months ago, maybe even a year now, my Aunt Joanna had a similar experience. She was working in that same third room because we don't have a real office. She's sitting at the desk, typing, and she glances toward the kitchen, and she sees me. Same thing, my back, my hair, my build, just walking around the kitchen like I was making coffee or getting something from the fridge. The thing is, I was asleep then too. That time, my older brother Diego was home, and he and I don't look that much alike. He's taller than me, a bit broader, lighter skin, different haircut. But my aunt was sure it was me she saw. Later that day, when I finally get up, Joanna asks me, "Hey, why didn't you answer me when I called you earlier?" And I'm like, "When?" She explains. She saw me in the kitchen, called my name, and I just ignored her. Didn't even look at her. I tell her, "I wasn't in the kitchen. I was sleeping." We kind of laughed it off at the time, like, "Oh, you must have seen Diego and just thought it was me." That's what she told herself too. It was easier than thinking about any other explanation. But now, with my mom's story today, it's harder to just shrug it off. The weirdest part is that for a while, like 2 or 3 years ago, I already had this strange feeling that someone else was living in our apartment. Not in a horror movie way, more in a quiet, nagging way. I just couldn't shake the sense that there was, I don't know, another presence using the space, like a roommate I never saw. Back then, we still had this old bed in the third room. It was pushed against the wall, and underneath it there was this dark space that always made me uncomfortable. I kept getting the feeling someone was hiding under there. I know how it sounds, trust me. I'm not saying I literally saw anyone. But whenever I walked past that room, there was this tightness in my chest, this thought in the back of my mind. There's someone under that bed. I would sometimes go in on purpose and check, just to prove to myself it was all in my head. Every time, nothing. Just dust in some random boxes. Around that time, it also felt like food would disappear faster. Like snacks I was sure we still had were suddenly gone. Little things would be in places I didn't remember leaving them. Keys, cables, pens. The kind of stuff you lose all the time anyway, which makes it easy to blame on forgetfulness. Eventually, that feeling faded. We got rid of the bed, rearranged the room, and life went on. The sense that someone else was sharing the apartment with us kind of dissolved. But now, with my mom and my aunt both seeing me when I wasn't actually there, it sort of brings that old feeling back. I even thought about those creepy stories you see online, where someone secretly lives in someone's attic or behind a wall or in a crawl space. And for a second, I wondered if something like that could be happening here. But honestly, in this apartment, it's basically impossible. We're in this small place in the city, no attic, no weird hidden storage area, no extra entrance or anything. You can see almost everything from the main hallway. There's nowhere for a person to sneak around, let alone live here without being noticed. So I'm left with, I don't know what. Nothing else especially weird has happened. No objects flying around, no voices, nothing dramatic like that. Just this other version of me, wandering through the kitchen and the living room every now and then. And the strange, quiet feeling that maybe, for a while, there really was someone else living here with us. Someone I'll probably never actually meet. So, I'm 26 now. I grew up basically orphaned, raised by my grandmother Rosa in this small, tired house at the end of a quiet street. The best way I can describe the place is that it feels heavy, like the walls have soaked up 40 years of grief and never let it go. This house has seen addiction, domestic violence, deaths, self-harm, things people don't like to say out loud. You can feel it in the air, like humidity, but emotional. There's one room in particular that feels like the center of it all. The room at the end of the hall. That was my childhood bedroom. Before me, it was my dad's, and before him, it belonged to my cousin Leo, who died in a car accident when he was 20. At different points, my grandmother rented it out to people who were going through their lowest moments. Breakups, rehab, divorce, you name it. And even now, if you step inside, it's like walking into a memory that doesn't want to let go of you. I was around 3 the first time I noticed anything wrong. It started with footsteps, heavy footsteps in that room, like a grown man pacing back and forth. I remember lying in bed and just listening to them go from one wall to the other, over and over. My grandma, Rosa, would say, "Oh, honey, it's just the house settling." But it never sounded random. It was too rhythmic, too intentional. Heel, toe, turning at the wall, coming back again. We could never keep a light working in there. Every bulb burned out way too fast. Lamps would end up knocked over, sometimes broken, within a week or two of putting them in. It got to the point where people would joke that the room hated light. When I was little, I'd see shadow figures standing in the doorway, just watching me play. Not moving, just there. The closet door refused to stay shut. Every night I would close it, and every night it would slowly creak open again, like someone inside needed air. Eventually, I started pushing my toy chest in front of the closet before bed. I was so small I had to lean my whole body into it, but it felt better than waking up at 3 in the morning and seeing that door opening inch by inch. Later on, everyone who ever slept in that room would complain about that same thing, the closet door never staying closed. For a while, the activity stayed small, annoying, unsettling, but manageable. Then I hit middle school, and everything changed. That was the year my depression really settled in, like a fog I couldn't walk out of. Around the same time, whatever was in the house seemed to wake up more. It wasn't just the room anymore. Doors started slamming on their own, even the ones we wedged open with shoes. My grandmother would hear voices calling her name, voices of people who had died, her sister, her husband, her mother. She'd stand in the hallway and say, "Did you just call me?" And I'd be in another room like, "No, Nana, that wasn't me." Sometimes, when I cried myself to sleep, I'd feel a hand holding mine, or a gentle pressure rubbing my back in slow circles. I grew up believing it was my dead relatives, staying close. It comforted me, honestly. I felt protected. But when I got to high school, my belief started to shift. Everyone who stayed over heard those footsteps at some point. We'd all look at each other like, "You heard that too, right?" But then, the voices of the dead stopped being the only voices my grandmother was hearing. When I was about 15, I started spending less and less time at home, staying with friends, finding excuses to be anywhere but that house. But my voice, apparently, didn't always leave with me. My grandmother would be alone in the living room, and she'd hear me calling her from the other side of the house. Clear as day. My tone, my cadence, calling Nana or Grandma from the room at the end of the hall. The first time she told me that, I felt this chill go through my whole body. She said the moment she heard my voice when I wasn't home, that's when everything escalated. Light fixtures started falling from the ceiling as we walked underneath them. Not just flickering, dropping. Figures in the dark stopped lurking at the edges and started appearing more often, closer. Footsteps would circle my bed at night, not just passing by, circling. Doors would lock themselves with us still inside. Things would go missing and show up in strange places we knew we hadn't put them. Time got weird too. We'd lose hours without realizing it. We'd look at each other and say, "How is it that late already?" And then I started getting sick. I missed so much school that I had to get my GED instead of a traditional diploma. I was always exhausted, always in pain, and the doctors didn't know what was wrong at first. Eventually, they found out I had a serious issue with my kidney, one of several health problems that seemed to burst into existence all at once. I'm not saying the house caused it. Life is complicated and messy, and bodies fail for all kinds of reasons. But the timing was hard to ignore. I can't fully separate what happened to my health from what was happening in that room. So I file it all in the same mental folder, even if I don't have answers. It's been about a decade since the worst of it. These days, honestly, our life in the house is almost boring. We don't rent out that room anymore. That decision alone seemed to calm things down a bit. Every couple of months, my grandmother and I cleanse the room, burning herbs, praying, opening windows, speaking out loud that anything negative has to leave. It's become part of our routine, like spring cleaning, but spiritual. I still see the occasional shadow person. Something will vanish from a table and show up a week later in a drawer no one uses. When that starts happening more often, we just look at each other and go, "Okay, I guess it's time to cleanse again." The last time we did it was this past summer. I'd taken a friend, Maya, to see the room. She's into paranormal stuff and kept asking about it, so I finally said, "Okay, come see it for yourself." We stepped inside, and I was kind of narrating the history of the room, trying to keep things light. She brushed her hand against the wall near the closet. A few minutes later, she said, "Ow," and pulled her hand back. There were 3 long, red scratches down her forearm. Not deep, but clearly there. No nails, no splinters, nothing around her that could have done it by accident. That was the first time someone was physically hurt by whatever is in that room. And since then, it's been quiet. Quieter than I'm used to, actually. I don't know if it was a one-time thing or a warning or just some strange fluke I'll never understand. Part of me is scared it was the beginning of something, but another part of me wants to believe it was the room finally letting go of one last burst of whatever it had been holding on to. So we live here, me and my grandmother, Rosa. We cook, we argue about TV shows, we complain about the weather. Sometimes I catch a shadow in the hallway that disappears when I look twice. Sometimes an old floorboard creaks in that familiar, measured rhythm. And I think, maybe the house is still haunted. Maybe we are too. But for now, at least, we're learning how to live with it. So, let me tell you about something that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. Back when I was doing my master's degree in the Netherlands, I was renting this tiny attic room in a really old canal house. The building was actually listed as a historical monument, with a little plaque by the front door and everything. I always thought that was kind of cool, like, wow, I'm living in history. I've never been the type to jump to paranormal explanations. I'm pretty rational. I've had those half-awake moments where you see shadowy figures at the edge of your vision, but I've always been able to explain them away as dream residue or sleep paralysis. But this one thing, it stuck with me for years, and I still don't know what to do with it. So, in this house, I lived at the very top, up this steep, narrow staircase, typical Dutch stairs that are more like a ladder than stairs. Up there were just 2 rooms, mine and my roommate's. The bathroom, annoyingly, was on the floor below. So every night before bed, I had to go down that short flight of steps to use the bathroom. I've always had trouble sleeping, insomnia stuff, and part of my getting ready for bed ritual is that I have to use the bathroom right before I try to sleep. If I don't, my brain just won't let it go. Anyway, one night, it's around 3 a.m. I'm in the bathroom, sitting there, basically half asleep. And just as I'm about to stand up, I hear someone whistling. It wasn't loud. It was this soft, casual whistling, like someone absent-mindedly whistling a tune while doing something else. But it was clear. Not like a distant sound, not like something muffled through walls, just there. I froze. At first I thought, oh, maybe someone left a TV on, or they're watching something on their laptop. On that floor, there were 3 other rooms, so it wasn't a crazy idea. The tune didn't sound familiar, just a simple little melody, a few notes looping, like whoever it was wasn't really thinking about it. The next day at breakfast, I asked my housemates, super casual, like, hey, were any of you awake around 3 last night? I thought I heard someone watching something or whistling. They all kind of frowned and shook their heads. One of them, my roommate upstairs, let's call her Lena, said, no, I was knocked out by midnight. Why? I told them I'd heard something, but I didn't make a big deal out of it. I just thought, okay, maybe I misheard something. Old houses make weird sounds. Pipes, wind, whatever. I tried to forget about it. The next night, though, it happened again. Same thing. I couldn't sleep. Finally dragged myself out of bed, went down to the bathroom. It was sometime between 2:30 and 3 a.m. I remember it being very quiet. No traffic, no voices, just that heavy nighttime silence you get in old buildings. I'm in there, finishing up, and then the whistling. Same kind of tune, soft, slow, almost bored sounding. But this time, the moment I heard it, my whole body went cold. You know that feeling when every instinct you have suddenly goes, something is wrong. What scared me wasn't just the sound itself, it was where it felt like it was coming from. It didn't feel like it was coming through a wall or from another room. It felt close, like someone was standing just outside the bathroom door, or even right behind me. I remember sitting there, completely still, listening. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This is not a TV. This is not someone's laptop. This is for me? The whistling went on for a few more seconds. Then it stopped. No footsteps, no doors, nothing. Just silence again. I didn't even wash my hands properly. I just splashed some water, opened the door, and practically ran up the stairs. I shut my bedroom door, locked it, and stood there, listening, waiting for I don't know what. Nothing else happened that night, but I barely slept. Over the next few days, it kept happening. Not every single night, but often enough. I think in total it was like 5 or 6 times, always between 2 and 3 a.m, and always when I was in the bathroom at that time. It was never random. It never happened when I was brushing my teeth at midnight, or if I went down earlier in the evening. Only in that weird, liminal window of the night when everything feels a little thinner and stranger. Every single time, that same heavy, uneasy feeling washed over me. The sound was always just loud enough that I knew it was real, but soft enough that it felt intimate. Like someone was very close, whistling just for me. I started changing my behavior because of it. I stopped drinking anything after 9 p.m. just so I wouldn't need to go downstairs. I bought melatonin and started taking it in the evenings so I could hopefully just fall asleep without having to get up again. And honestly, it worked. On the nights I slept through, I didn't hear anything. But I also felt like I was just avoiding the whole thing instead of understanding it. The weirdest part was that my roommate upstairs, Lena, never heard a thing. She used the same bathroom. She sometimes went down around the same time if she couldn't sleep. I asked her, more than once, "Hey, have you ever heard whistling down there at night? Or humming? Like when you're in the bathroom?" She'd always shake her head and say, "No, never. It's probably a TV or someone outside. These old houses echo." But I know what a TV from another room sounds like. You get that fuzzy, distant quality. And I know what outside sounds are like. You hear cars, or footsteps, or voices trailing off. This wasn't like that. It was clean, close, like someone was in the same space. This all happened when I was 24. I'm 30 now, and I still think about it sometimes. Not every day, but every now and then something will remind me. The sound of someone whistling in a hallway, or being in a strange bathroom at night. And it just hits me again, that cold, unsettled feeling. I've tried to explain it to myself in all the logical ways. I've read about sleep-related hallucinations, sound illusions, even gone down rabbit holes about folklore and creatures and all that. At one point, I even looked into things like wendigos, though most of those stories are tied to forests, wilderness, outdoors. This was inside a house, a very normal house, in the middle of a city. And the thing is, I wasn't half asleep every time. A couple of those nights, I remember being very awake, like wired and restless from insomnia, clear-headed, and still, the whistling. I don't have a conclusion to this story. I still don't know what it was. Maybe there is a rational explanation that I just haven't thought of. Maybe it was something benign that my brain wrapped in fear. Or maybe it was something else. All I know is, even now, years later, when I get up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, there's always this tiny moment where I pause and listen, just to make sure there's no soft little melody waiting for me in the dark.